Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would everyone stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Patty, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Marino.
Here.
Vice Mayor Marciano.
Here.
Councilmember Woods.
Here, ma'am.
Councilmember Lane.
Here.
Councilmember Litt.
Here. Thank you. As we customarily do to accommodate distinguished guests in the audience, I'd request that we reorder the agenda to move up announcements and presentations and then follow that by elections and reorganizations. Would that be okay with the rest of the council?
Here's the issue, Mayor Marino. It's a holiday. I observe the first day of Passover and the last day, and it starts at sundown, which means I'm going to have to leave at about 7:30. So if we could do the organizational meeting first, I'd like to be able to vote for that while I'm here. But I have to leave at 7:30 to observe the holiday. So I'd rather, if we could just quickly do some business before we get to the presentation. That'd be
I don't know if there's anything quick about this. How does everyone else on the council feel?
I'm happy to recognize Councilman Lane's commitments. So if that's what we need to do to allow him to celebrate the holiday, then I'm comfortable doing so.
Okay. Then I will keep the agenda as written. And is everyone else okay with that? Rochelle? Carl?
I was going to go a different direction with that, Maria, because I know there's a lot of people here that need to get in and out of here. And I know Representative Roth is on a tight time schedule, and I think there was a lot of effort to juggle everything, including changing the agenda around. So I think that as mayor, you should do whatever you feel is best. I'm good with leaving the agenda as adjusted. Here.
Okay, so we have 2-4. Oh, and I don't know how quickly we can do the election and the reorganization.
We could do the reorganization first, wait for the election results after the fact if need be. Or, you know, I will defer to your leader call, but that's...
I would not want to rush through the reorganization.
No, I think we need to do that.
I do not think we need to rush through that.
I think we should start with the reorganization because we all know what the results of the election are.
So, Mayor, I think it's up to you. It sounds like you have two.
Well, I am...
Yeah.
Representative Roth, how are you? Well, then if you are fine with that, then I will, if it's all right with the council, I will go right to reorganization. Then we'll conduct a little city business. Then we'll have Rick and Matt. And then we will do the election results and go from there. So do I need a motion to amend the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, may I have a motion to amend the agenda to put reorganization first?
I move that we decide the reorganization first on the agenda.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Moved in second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, with reorganization, I am now accepting nominations for mayor.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, and I need to read the
apologize.
title.
Patty, may I have the clerk read the title, please?
Yes, ma'am. Resolution 12, 2018, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, appointing the mayor and vice mayor for the city, providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you. At this time, now, may I I'm accepting nominations for mayor and vice mayor.
Are we going to have any discussion on this prior to nominations?
Do we need discussion?
I think it would be a good idea to see what everybody's thinking on this subject as far as how to go about it? No? Is there anyone else who feels that discussion?
Anybody for discussion, or do we just make a motion to nominate?
We can discuss as we go. I'd like to make a motion that that the council consider Maria Marino as mayor for the following year. If anyone would like to second that, or if you'd like to discuss that, we certainly can.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion?
I don't think we need discussion. We're a pretty tight group. We know where everybody is. We know what meetings we're going. We know what direction we're going, other than you know,
The only
But
discussion.
unless we
the
wanna-
only- Well, the only,
Let's, one at a time.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Carl, finish?
finish, Carl.
but actually, I mean, I could say something positive as Rochelle, so if we want to discuss, I'm not going to argue with it either way. I'll start even.
Okay, so I'll recognize Rochelle.
Thank you, Mary. No, I just wanted to say, we're in an unusual position in that all of us pretty much have the same time served, with the exception of Carl and Maria. And a lot of what we've done in the past couple of months was for the sake of stability for the city. And I think it would be a mistake to go any other way but to nominate the mayor to stay on for another year.
Thank you.
That's all I wanted to.
Yeah, and
Anyone
I'll-
else?
Yeah, Maria, I'll second that. I think that, you know, the mayor is it's hard enough to become a council member, let alone to become a mayor with the legalities of everything, not to mention the state of the city and all the presentations. And, right, you're the face of the city. You were during the hurricanes. You're the tip of the spear for us right now, and I just assume that for the next year you stay in that position because we need you where you're at right now. And that's how I feel.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No? Okay, so I have a motion and a second, or I have a nomination for Maria Marino as mayor. And you can tell that even after a year, I still have a little difficulty with procedure. That's why I'm always looking to Max to make sure I'm doing things right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now, vice mayor. Do I have any nominations for vice mayor?
I nominate Mark Marciano as vice mayor.
Do I have any other nominations for vice mayor? And I will hand the gavel to Mark for a moment as our current vice mayor. I would actually like to nominate Carl Woods as vice mayor. So we have 2 nominations. How do we do this?
Well, since you have 2 individual nominations, you can vote on each nomination.
Okay.
You would-
May I make a comment?
Certainly.
I'd actually like to remove my name as an option for vice mayor due to some personal and business issues that are going to come up this coming year, so having a little bit less responsibility. It's not really less responsibility, but perhaps a little
More in a
bit,
different way.
perhaps. So I would actually like to second the appointment of Carl as our vice mayor, Carl Woods.
And I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Okay. So we have a nomination for Carl Woods.
And
And a second?
I was going to suggest that it might be a good idea for someone else to get a chance to be in charge of the weather and all the other important stuff that the vice mayor has to do, and another learning experience for
And
somebody.
based on how well the weather was
going
for
forward.
every event
I don't know,
we
maybe
It
we
was.
should-
You did an awesome job.
Although we had 2 or 3 hurricanes rip right up the middle of the state.
Yeah, but not during.
I don't know,
not
is that
during
on you
city
too?
events, so, right.
Well, the more experience each of us can get in doing the various things, I think is a good thing, and I'm happy with supporting Carl for vice mayor.
And just last comment, and at the end, and I'm sorry, Matthew, you won't be here to be a part of the conversation, but I would like to bring up some thoughts I've had about this whole process at the end of the meeting tonight, so.
Thank you.
I'll watch it on TV, on the internet.
You can't be watching it tonight.
No, tonight. I'll watch it on Sunday.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so we have a nomination and a first and a second. So all those in favor of Carl being vice mayor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, so that's mayor, vice mayor.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So now, if it would be okay, may we bring announcements and presentations as the next agenda item?
I'll make a motion that we move announcements and presentations to the next item on the agenda.
Thank
I'll
you.
second it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well,
Some discussion, just briefly, since I'm not going to be here, I've strongly led the push for steeplechase in the wall, and I know the city manager is going to be talking about it later on. I'm not going to be here, but it's my understanding they're going to be moving the workshop and the discussion into June, and I think it's a great idea, and I look forward to it, and I very much support steeplechase in their endeavors.
and that will be part of the city manager's report, and we'll keep everybody posted. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so may I please ask Representative? Do I have a motion and a second? Oh, I need a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Representative Roth, are you ready for us? You got a lot of stuff for us?
Got 3 minutes.
No, because we may pummel you with questions. You never know.
Well, I'm hoping for some questions. Well, I'm very happy to be here tonight. I thank Mayor Marino for her participation in the legislative process through our discussions this year. And also I thank Vice Mayor Marciano and the council members for the great job you all are doing. And can't say anything about Palm Beach Gardens without mentioning your manager, Ron Ferris. You all do a very great job, and I'm proud to call this the center of my district and the gold star in my district. This year was really a monumental legislative session. We had many unexpected challenges over the 62 days. We first spent a lot of time focusing on the devastating effects of Hurricane Irma. And then just as budget deliberations were beginning to start, the horrific tragedy in Parkland on February the 14th just totally changed the whole focus of the entire legislative session. In both cases, I felt like it was my duty to ensure that no Floridian is left unprotected. We did pass our budget one day late, $88.7 billion. It does fund an increase in education. It improves school safety, and we did battle the opioid crisis. The historic Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act that was signed into law provides for $76 million for mental health assistance, $67.5 million to establish a school marshal program, provides $98 million in aid for safe schools allocation, $99 million for a grant program for the hardening of school buildings, and provides $62 million for school resource officers. And this is in addition to a normal education budget. These are all additional dollars. In their budget, there was also a $130 million increase for Medicaid funding and $109 million for affordable housing. This year, we also passed a $170 million tax reduction package, which means more money in the pockets of families and students, farmers, business owners, military families and service members, and of course other Floridians. We also included $100 million for the Florida Forever program, of which I also co-sponsored. Now I'd like to get on to the good news pertaining to Palm Beach Gardens. I'm happy to report that the state has funded your Palm Beach Gardens stormwater maintenance repairs and operations program at the $250,000 requested. We also had in the budget for the hardening of the Palm Beach Gardens municipal complex at $750,000. I got it into the budget, the final budget, for $500,000, and then it was vetoed. But I think it was vetoed because there was $400 million spent on the Public Safety Act. I'm looking forward to, if Lord willing I get reelected, to working with you next session on these type of appropriations. It just shows, I think it shows that Palm Beach Gardens was very thoughtful in their approach. I think going forward that cities and counties that are looking for these type of appropriations that do some type of matching funds and have done very thoughtful appropriations themselves in the past, you know, we can be very successful. So I look forward to that. I'm happy to report that one of the bills that I ran, HB 803, which was emergency energy equipment sales tax exemption, it did not pass in its entirety, but it was included in the Hurricane Disaster Preparedness sales tax holiday. And what it does, since the governor did sign into law requiring the nursing homes and assisted living facilities to get generators by July 1st of 18, but I'm also told that probably will be extended to December 31st of 18. What my language does is give them up to a $15,000 sales tax exemption So if you spent $250,000 on a generator, you would save that $15,000 in sales tax. That was my provision, and I'm happy that that took place, given obviously that the idea of a mandatory purchase really didn't sit well with everybody. But we are happy to report that, that this will mean that there will be areas on site at these facilities where they'll be able to maintain reasonable temperatures. I think it's 78 degrees Fahrenheit during a power shortage. And Florida is one of the first states in the nation to require emergency generators at these facilities. In closing, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to represent you. I'm looking forward to more participation from my council, from you guys, and I appreciate so much the representation you sent up there, Matt Forrest and others. They do an excellent job. I think we probably can do a better job next year, given obviously different circumstances, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
I'm sure we have some. So I will start. Matthew, because you have a minimal amount of time, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions for the representative. We talk fairly frequently.
Rochelle.
Well, first, I'd like to thank Representative Roth for sponsoring our 3 appropriations bills and going to fight for us up there. I know money was short this year, even more so than normal, and we appreciate your doing that. Going forward, as the attack on home rule is going to continue, and we will probably see some of these bills come back and others, we're hoping that with council involvement, and we can convince you to convince other people that Palm Beach Gardens does know what they're doing, and we don't need Tallahassee to interfere between us and our residents when making decisions that affect us here at home.
Thank you, Rochelle. Carl?
I'm going to second Rochelle on that. So, but Rick, much better this year than last year. Sorry for my voice. I actually went over with Alicia in detail on everything you voted on, and we noticed that there were some sneaky language that undermined home rule to try and take more to give the local jurisdiction less authority. And I noticed that on some of those choices you voted against them as well, so that was, you're supporting. So definitely going the right direction. I appreciate what you did go to battle for, specifically for what we needed in the gardens, which was the storm and so on. So I just want to say thank you again for this year, and you and I are gonna spend some time together, I'm sure, over the next year, see what happens next year.
If I could make one comment, I tell people, anybody that comes in my office, please contact me as early as possible about legislation you don't like. You know the process, but a lot of people don't fully understand it. The sooner you can deal with a bill and amend it in committee, the better chance you have of either defeating it or amending it to make it palatable. We had one situation this year where Representative Halsey Beshears had inserted some language in a bill, in an ag bill, having to do with puppy mills, to coin the phrase, and it was put in at the last minute, but at least several of us were notified, and we went to Halsey and we went to our leadership and said, look, we can't have this in the bill, and they did remove it out of the bill. But that's very difficult to do once it gets on the floor. So my only recommendation to anybody that comes to Tallahassee is to come early in the process, and if you have something in the bill you don't like, let's work together and try to fix it. It's much easier to fix than it is to kill.
Rick, I think it was, and forgive me if I'm mistaken on this, but that specific question, which was about the puppy mills under agriculture, the very next question had the word puppies in it. So, Alicia, they were referring directly to animals, so it was like they were trying to mislead you, take your focus off the one which said nothing about puppy mills, and then they put puppy language in the very next question.
Right.
So it's sneaky, and I appreciate you paying attention on that specific one.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you for coming, Representative Roth. It's always good to know that our representation higher up the ladder is willing to come and talk to the little people back home. I know that you've gone through a learning curve, as have we. You've been in Tallahassee for a couple of years, and it's a different world there. visited Tallahassee way too many times over the years to see how it actually works, and I'm sure you see that as well. But the only comment, and you're going to hear it from us, and we have a nice relationship, and I do plan on sitting down with you shortly and having breakfast again and talking a little bit about how the cities need to protect. And I think the hardest part that you all face is that you obviously get information from the entire state of Florida, and there might be something going on some part of the state that is not right. And those people in those particular communities may go to their representatives and say, this isn't right, we need to fix it. And then there's this blanket fix that might impact the entire state. Right. So you end up penalizing other communities like ours that might not need that. And that's basically the thought process that I'm sure you've seen and heard from other places. And of course, coming back home, you see how well we run our city and how well we want to make sure we can continue to be close to our residents, as Rochelle said. And that's what I'm going to ask that you continue to do, and I know you will. I have 100% confidence in you in doing that. I also wanted to commend you and the entire state legislature for really tackling the violence, the gun violence, very quickly. Although I don't think it went far enough, I'm grateful for the fact that you put everything else aside. A lot of other items that might have gone through the legislative session didn't, because there was a focus on doing what was probably the most important thing that we have to remember as elected officials, and that's protecting the public. So you stepped up as a group, and you passed some important legislation that protected the people. I look forward to talking with you more about how we can further that next year, but I just want to thank you for that.
I appreciate that. I would like to make one comment on the Public Safety Act. The good news is that we did have an adequate amount of time. We really spent 3 weeks on the bill. In the last week of session, we spent almost the entire time on the bill. There are actually 14 different sets of provisions in the bill. Five of them are mental health. 6 of them are dealing with guns or school resource officers or the Marshall Program, and then 3 of them are dealing directly about hardening and making schools safer. So it's an unbelievably well thought out, comprehensive bill. It's very refreshing for me to report to you that you can actually read the entire bill in the first reading, and it will actually make sense to you. It's very well thought out. It's very well balanced. It does a lot of things. It gives a lot of options to the school districts to do things. The unfortunate part, from my perspective, is as a pro-business person that doesn't like a lot of government regulations, this bill does have a lot of things that the school districts are going to have to do, the superintendents are going to have to do, the Department of Education is going to have to do. It really is putting a lot of burden on people, but the good news is it also gives options. And we, as I was mentioning to Councilman Lane as we were walking in, we really did get a lot of counsel from legal and from judges and other people to make sure that we didn't write something that we found to be unconstitutional. So we gave the school districts their discretion. We gave the sheriff's office discretion. Do they want to implement these programs? But I think my heartfelt belief is that we did a very, very good first step, but there's a lot more left to be done.
Well, you did fund the initiatives as well, which was very important. You just didn't say, here, go do this, and you have until next week to get it done. You actually funded it, which is good. So that's an important step. We'll talk more a little bit about how the city may want to strengthen some language in some way, shape, or form, but I just wanted to thank you for doing that. And I know because I know a lot of different organizations that have legislative agendas, and I know a lot of them didn't get a chance to be heard towards the end, but when you think about the importance of what you guys did at the end, that made a lot of sense, so thank you.
So last but not least, again, thank you for the appropriations for the city, but I have to say but, sorry. I'm looking at too many things here, and I'm going to go with Rochelle and Carl on this, that really do attack home rule. And I would like to reemphasize, is that a word, reemphasize? Yes. Okay.
Is this the document you're talking about here?
I would like to reemphasize the fact that the city of Palm Beach Gardens is a very, very well-run city, and we don't need to be told by Tallahassee how to do our jobs. And there were way too many way too many bills and Senate bills that a charge was led to attack home rule. And I know you and I have had this discussion about home rule, and I know how difficult it is to voice an opinion in one direction when the rest of the party is voicing it in another, and then it sort of challenges how your bills get heard later on. But it really takes somebody standing up there and saying, you know what, this really isn't right for the cities, and we need that proponent for us. So I hope in the future you can hear what I'm saying.
My response to that would be some of the conversations we've had before and with the manager. It's a very fine line we all have to walk. I think the good news is that any legislation like that you feel like is going too far, my door is open, and we will definitely go to bat and try to either kill or amend or at least get your opinion heard where it needs to be heard. I did that, talked with several people in the business community because they didn't like some of the regulations that we're dealing with. I can't think of the bill right now, but
Economic Development, Tourism, Promotion, Accountability.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that was one I went to the sponsor on. I believe it was.
I don't have a sponsor's name.
I have it right in the tip of my head. I can't think of it. Yeah, it was Mike Grant, because there's two grants. I couldn't get the name out of my head, but I sat down with Mike Grant and with the staff of the committee that it came out of, and tried to amend the bill. And I told Kelly Smallridge, please give me something in writing that you would like that we could do and try to amend the bill. But the problem was the bill was literally 3 or 4 days from being voted on the floor. It was too late to do anything. And honestly, the answer you normally get in those situations is, no, we don't have an amendment. We just want you to kill it. And that's very hard to do. Mm-hmm. So I do hear what you're saying, Mayor. I hear what everybody's saying. And I'm just thankful that I've got a city like Palm Beach Gardens that doesn't stray too far. So you're not going to have me sponsoring a bill against home rule, right?
Well, we appreciate that. Well, do you have any questions for us?
No, I'm going to stick around for a while because I want to hear all the rest of the exciting things that are going on.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you.
Well, next up on the agenda would be Matt Forrest. Oh, wait, you can come up, but I think I have a procedural point.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we actually didn't vote on Resolution 12, 2018 correctly, so we had a motion and a second.
You actually need a motion and a second to pass.
I need a motion and a second. May I have a motion for the appointment of mayor and vice mayor, please?
I'll make a motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Procedurally, we are now correct. This is why we have our city attorney here. Thank you, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. For the record, Matt Forrest with Ballard Partners. I am the city state legislative lobbyist. It's a pleasure to see all of you again. I'm going to try to give you an even shorter synopsis and try not to be redundant and cover what has already been said. For starters, let me start by thanking your staff. I've now represented the city for several years, and of all the clients that I have, I will tell you, even I sometimes forget that I don't work for the city of Palm Beach Gardens. I do feel a kindred spirit and a connection with your staff through Manager Ferris and through Alicia and even Max, to the point where I will send legislation to Alicia and say, yeah, you send this to Max. Like, I know I want to follow chain of command and I want to get this to Alicia, but I need Max to let me know exactly what this means. And so I do always think of myself as your local guy that goes to Tallahassee for you, but that can't happen if I don't have the synergy, I think, with your staff. And so I just want to say again, thank you to all the staff that texts me and calls me at all hours, and I feel like I can do the same vice versa, and I do feel like it is truly a team effort to whether we're successful or unsuccessful in Tallahassee. I do think this was a very successful year in Tallahassee for the city of Palm Beach Gardens. Going into the session with an election year, a hurricane, and also with the general philosophy of cuts going into the legislative process, I tried to manage expectations as best I could and say this was not the year to be looking for great projects. At the same time, we still put together 3 good projects, and with Representative Roth, we were able to file those in the House. And Surprisingly, two of them landed in the budget. I'll tell you, again, if this was baseball, you guys are in the All-Star game. Nobody else barely landed one. You guys landed two. It's disappointing that the governor vetoed one of them. I think it can be part of the fact that we had two in there, and it's one of those things like looking around. Everybody got one. You guys somehow got two in here. Well, we'll cut one out here. It was simply vetoed again, also because it said, according to the letter, this is a local project and it should be simply for local funds. It is hard to make a statewide case for why a city hall project needs state funds as opposed to local funds. But I do think it's a worthwhile cause, and I do think we can continue to work on that project and further ones down the way. So with all that said, also thank you to the state rep and also the senators that represent this area too, Senator Powell. You guys have great representation in Tallahassee. Everybody thinks of this process in the Tallahassee session as this, it's a quick thing and you sit back and it's all done, it's all orchestrated. As much as it may look that way from the outside looking in, internally it is a fury. It is a flurry of bills. This year there were 3,250 bills that were filed. So think of it, 3,250 just ideas. There's no basis to stop you from filing something. Anything you want, crazy idea, file it, throw it against the wall, see what sticks. Who cares if 1,000 people think it's the worst idea ever? It's just an idea. 3,200 of those were filed. Of those, 2,721 were amendments. People filed amendments to these ideas and said, that's a crazy idea, but we can make it a little better if we do this. And out of that, 527 committee meetings, 2,853 bills seen in committee in just those short 9 to 10 weeks. And out of that, you're looking at about Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So when you talk about just a flurry of ideas all being thrown against the wall and see what's going to happen, I can't thank Representative Roth enough. There's a ton of ideas all going on at the same time, all going on in various meetings. He always had an open door for us. Not only did he have an open door for any time I called, this is a thing that any time that you're doing legislative affairs for somebody, I was summoned several times. That I can't tell you guys how much you should appreciate. The fact that your representative not only took the time to say, where does this people at, but I want their lobbyists to come explain to me exactly where we're at on this issue. That's the kind of thing you want to have happen. Representative Roth did that several times. There are 160 member offices in the legislature. I know what Representative Roth's office looks like very well. I was in there many times sitting on the couch explaining exactly where Gardens was on certain issues. So thank you, Representative Roth, for the open door and for seeking our input on the numerous bills that came before you. Like you said, there was a lot of bills filed that were, quote unquote, against home rule or necessarily in opposition to local governments. Happily, I'm happy to say in the memo that I sent you guys, most of them all died, which is why it is a two-chamber system, and the House can throw a lot of ideas against the wall, and the Senate is kind of sometimes a filter to figure out what's going to get through there. I don't want to dive into all of those. If you want, I would say refer to my memo. Yeah, and feel free to give me a call. We can talk into some of more. But just big picture-wise, all the ones you got a lot of alerts on from the League of Cities, they all died. Tree trimming, election date changes, changes to CRAs died, including the tourism economic development, new regulations that was brought up earlier, that also died. Pet store sale preemptions, that wasn't even a bill that got built in, like Representative Roth said. Again, to great sponsors or to great representatives like that to hear this issue, and I'll tell you, I use the example of Palm Beach Gardens quite often on that issue. This was a big issue in Palm Beach Gardens. You think it's this little pet store thing up here. This was a big issue in Palm Beach Gardens, and to have an amendment with language in two different bills that would have completely washed all that away, all the hours you guys spent on debate here in this chamber would have gone away like that in Tallahassee if these things passed, was a big deal. So even those amendments failing was a big deal. Of note, a couple things did pass, though, that I think are significant. I'm sure Max is already up to speed on them and the rest of your staff. You'll want to take note. I think one of the most important ones was Senate Bill 376 relating to workers' compensation benefits for first responders. It now lists PTSD as a workers' comp-related issue under certain scenarios. I think it's a significant piece of legislation that passed. Of note also, this was the early session. We're done now, and we're sitting here in April, and we're going to give you the update. The recap got done in March. We will not go back into session until March of 2019 because that's the regularly scheduled session. So we have a long bulk time in between where there'll be an election in between, new leadership in the Senate, new leadership in the House, all new committee chairs, Representative Roth possibly could be me serving as a chair of some committee at the next legislative session. So it's a brand new slate. And so I get asked all the time, what will be back? Like the mayor even said, there's an attack on home rule. Will it continue? I'm not so sure it will. This is definitely a legislative change. There is definitely a new leadership coming in, and I do think you will see new priorities and a new agenda with that. There are a couple bills, though, that I think will be back. If I was on ESPN prognosticating, I would give you a couple. I do think vacation rentals will be back. It failed again this year. I've watched this issue for years. There's a big battle and a big debate out in the public. I see it as a pendulum. Which way will the pendulum swing? Local government would like a lot more control over where vacation rentals are allowed. Property right owners and people that own individual homes would like a lot less government regulation as to what they can do with their property, whether they want to live in it full time or they want to rent it out for a weekend, a year, a month, a week, whatever. That debate continued again this year, but of note this year, it was the first time I ever saw language filed through an amendment process in the Senate that preempted all of it to the state and basically made vacation rentals similar to like a hotel, and they would be regulated under DBPR. It's the first time probably at least a 4 or 5 year battle of this issue where I've ever seen the language go that new direction. So I do think that is something to take note of. I think it'll be back again next year, and I do think that might be the area that they're going. I think the vacation rental industry, again, I don't represent them, so I don't know, but your Airbnbs and things like that will probably be looking too much like what the Uber model did and said, trying to get local regulations on this that aren't going to matter. Let's go to the state level and try to get a statewide preemption in a way that we can tolerate it. I also think there's an issue that's been around for several years also regarding firefighters and cancer. Firefighters all have a preponderance for cancer, whether it's early in their career, late in the career, or after retirement. There's been legislation for several years dealing with that. I do think that comes back again next year. Other than those two things, I think it's a jump ball as to what the next legislative session will hold, and it all depends on the leadership that goes into it. I do look forward to working with your staff. Like I said, as much as it feels like it's a long break between now and March, it isn't. The primary is in August. The election is in November. We will be looking for projects, appropriations, stuff to work on between now and probably December. And as much as it looks like an easy thing, you just put this project together and throw it out there, I can tell your staff shaking their heads. We spend weeks and weeks and weeks debating exactly how to write that paragraph to make that water project sound exactly the way it needs to sound and make sure the project reflects that. So we'll be doing that. We would love your input throughout the process, throughout this summer. And then legislation, you'll start getting filed. You'll start seeing legislative ideas after the election. So the election happens in November. You'll start seeing legislative agendas, start seeing legislation getting filed November and December. January and February are committee weeks. The session will begin in March of 2019. And with that, hopefully you all have my cell phone number. I live locally. Take advantage of me while I'm here. It costs you nothing. And it's a pleasure to serve you. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Michelle.
No, I just want to thank you for serving the city and for helping Maria and I navigate Tallahassee when we went up for Palm Beach County Days in January and get to see firsthand how it works and the bills coming, and we got to sit in on some of the committees and visit with some of the representatives, and just thank you.
Pleasure.
Carl, any questions?
No, I know you have a very good reputation, and the city leans on you a lot. So sorry about my voice, so I just want to thank you for working with staff very closely, and I look forward to the next year. You and I need to get together and talk just like I do with Mr. Roth.
Absolutely.
But thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Mark.
No, I just encourage the council to make sure we have a presence there. I mean, you're great. I think having our faces or somebody's faces up there, maybe the vice mayor, maybe, I don't know, whoever wants to go next year to Tallahassee, it's always good to have us up there just to make sure our local representatives, like Representative Roth, know that we're not that far away from Tallahassee. So.
We can take and explain.
Do you have a question, Ron?
No, just a comment, if you would, please.
Absolutely.
I have to say this is probably one of the most intense years that I recall in the past several that we've had to be involved in the legislative process. I can't think of better people to have involved in that process than our own Alicia Sanders here, which day and night, night and day, 7 days a week. She's in my office telling me about the latest things that's going on and how her and Matt have talked at 7 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night, and how helpful Representative Roth has been throughout the whole process. So I appreciate your kind words, Matt, about staff and Max and Representative Roth, but I want to thank you for your dedication and your devotion to this city, because Alicia wouldn't let you be any other way. I'm just kidding. I know you work real hard for this city, and I really appreciate it. And again, this was one intense year, and I think you deserve a very long vacation, so please get one.
I wish I could take it. Alicia would probably text me. I've made it a point that my wife knows who Alicia is, because I knew if she didn't, she'd be alarmed by the number of text messages Alicia sends me, and she would wonder who this person is. So, really, you guys should. I work with a lot of cities, not a lot, a few. Few staff members are as engaged in the process as Alicia is, to the point where she, again, knows how to get in touch with me. We're constantly texting, hey, I saw this amendment filed. I'm like, so have I haven't read it yet. I have. Here's what it does. Great. So she's an asset. She's an asset to have, without a doubt.
Thank you. And I'd also like to recognize Sherry Healy in the audience, Rick's aide, who has been a longtime staffer and knows her way around. Thank you. Anyone else, Rick, I need to recognize?
Elaine is also here. Who's Elaine here? Right here. Representative Roth's office, Elaine Higgins.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Job well done. All right. Next up, we are going to recognize Camilla Soares and Renee Gold. Corey, could you help us with that? Let's see, this is the end of the announcements and presentations. Yeah. This will be the last item on our announcements and presentations, and then we will go back to the agenda. Got to go there. Yeah. Yeah.
For the record, Corey Bissett, Division Chief of EMS, Palm Beach Gardens Fire Rescue. We're here tonight to recognize two citizens that rendered aid to a female patient. I believe we have a video here that will kind of give a synopsis of the situation.
Tonight at the Publix in Palm Beach Gardens, where it all happened. Vince?
The situation went down inside of a bathroom. The Pushpoint app alerted one woman someone needed CPR, so she rushed over to help. And bound by fate, those two women triumphed together and kept a heart beating.
It was the weekend. Paramedic Camilla Soares was out getting her nails done when she received a Pushpoint notification.
It just said that someone next door at the Publix needed CPR.
So she rushed over.
I needed to be there. I know I needed to save this person's life.
They were having trouble breathing.
Publix worker Renee Gold dragged the unconscious woman out of a bathroom stall and called 911. The emergency call caused the Pushpoint notification.
Red has a heart and a little rhythm.
Pushpoint is an app designed to alert CPR-certified individuals of nearby situations where they can help.
I just did the best I could and tried to save this poor woman's life.
Soares was racing through the store as the 911 operator told Gold to start giving CPR.
I needed to do something and do something quick.
Soares arrived, assessed the scene, and took over for Gold.
I noticed that she gasped for air, so I checked for a pulse again, and she did not have a pulse. So I immediately started CPR again.
The woman's heart began beating again, and firefighters arrived.
People, no matter what they're doing, can help save a life.
County officials credit Soares for being the first Pushpoint app user in Palm Beach County to save someone's life.
If something ever happens again and it pops up on my phone, they can for sure guarantee that I will be there.
Palm Beach Gardens Fire Rescue is awarding both women with the prestigious Citizen Life-Saving Award Thursday during a city council meeting. Live in Palm Beach Gardens, Vincent Crivelli, CBS.
Tonight at the Publix in Palm Beach Gardens.
So as you can see from the video, pretty much sums it all up, but I like to add, again, how important bystander CPR is. and getting the public involved. And these two women did a fantastic job assisting this woman who had a successful outcome, discharged from the hospital shortly after she was brought there by us. So I really like to commend them for a great job they did. It was pretty much a trifecta. So we have the Pulse Point app, which is a free app you can download on your phone. You had the public involved, respond to this emergency, and then you had fire rescue. So you had three elements that really came together for the success of this patient and her survival. So tonight we'll be awarding them with the Citizen Life Saving Award, and presenting it will be Fire Chief Keith Breyer and our Medical Director, Dr. Ken Shepke. First, I'd like to bring up Renee Gold. Like I say, Renee works at Publix, and you don't really get this every day at Publix where you have to actually drag someone from a bathroom and render aid. So, great job. Next up, Camilla Suarez. And again, I commend you too. You got to get your nails done, so great job. I mean, and she went back to get them done too, by the way.
Can we get a council picture too? Thank you. On behalf of the city, oh my gosh, thank you so much.
That's public to Northland, right?
Before we move on to reorganization, I would just like to recognize the folks that came here from Palm Beach State College earlier this evening, the students. Thank you very much. I know your interest in politics, and we visited a little bit ago at the Women in Politics, so I'm happy to have you here this evening. Getting involved is the first step. Okay.
Real quick, Earth Day is going to be coming up on Palm Beach State College, so I'll be there. So just seek us out. Yeah.
Oh, that's like the 19th, right? There you go. Okay. So to get back to where we were supposed to be, we are now moving to the election. So may I have the clerk read the title?
Yes, ma'am. Resolution 11, 2018, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, declaring the results of the general election held on March 13, 2018, providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay, so now we are at items of resident interest and board committee reports. Sorry, we're a little disorganized this evening, but I think we're on track now. So, Rochelle.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Besides the normal meetings and committee events that we attend over the month, there are usually many of them. There were two in particular since the last meeting that I attended that I wanted to touch briefly on because they're both so important. On March 29th, I attended a school safety panel discussion that was put together by Jupiter Vice Mayor Alon Coffer. It was not a formal workshop. None of the other council members from Jupiter were in attendance. The panel, though, included Chief Larry Leon of the Palm Beach County School District, Amity Schuyler, Chief of Staff and Chief Communications Officer for the school district, Barbara McQuinn, our school board representative, Alon, the Vice Mayor of Jupiter, Chief Kitzeron, the police chief for Jupiter, and Dr. Camille Coleman, the regional superintendent for the Palm Beach County School District. There were also 3 instructional superintendents that were there, one from each elementary, middle, and high school representing the district. Most of the people in attendance were teachers, school principals, and administration. There were some parents and members of the Parent-Teachers Association, or whatever we call those now. It's not PTA anymore. But the discussion centered around Senate Bill 7026, known as the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act, and how the money allocated to the Department of Education will be distributed to local governments to aid in their attempts to make schools safer. Adding school resource officers to cover each elementary school, hardening the buildings, adding counseling and mental health staff were all part of the things that were discussed. The main takeaways from this: all of the involved parties are still in the information gathering stages, and they are still looking at all of the options that are available and possible. So while we want things to happen quickly and we want answers from them yesterday, there is a process they have to go through. Adding school resource officers is a time-intensive task, as special training is needed for officers who are going to work with children and young adults in the school setting. It's important to place the right individuals in these positions. Also, some of the language in the bill contradicts or is at odds with other legislation, and that still needs to be worked out. Of big importance, too, is it's not known whether this funding will be a one-time allocation or if it will be renewed by the legislature. So for planning ahead, funding programs that may not have funding sources in the future is an important thing. Also, dialogue must continue between the school district, police department, city councils, and the community so that everyone is aware of where we stand. And to that effect, I've asked our city manager, Ron Ferris, to duplicate the panel at a more formal workshop for the residents of Palm Beach Gardens and the city council members in early August, right before we go back to school. By that time, we should have some answers on what has been done, what the plans are going forward, and I'd like to add Sheriff Rick Bradshaw to the panel as well, as he had some really good input countywide from the Sheriff's Department at another meeting that I heard him speak at. The second event was April 3rd, and it was the Palm Beach North Chambers Healthcare Committee's opiate panel discussion. The purpose of this panel discussion was to address the complex topic of opiate addiction through engaging residents and business leaders of Palm Beach North with public service and medical professionals regarding the impact of opiates in our community. The panelists on this were Dr. Alonzo, who's the director of the Florida Department of Health for Palm Beach, Dr. Andrick, who's the chief medical officer for the healthcare district of Palm Beach County, and Darcy Davis, who's the CEO of the healthcare district of the county, Chief Neil DeJesus, who is president of the Fire Chiefs Association of the county, and Dr. Aldo Morales from the Retreat at Palm Beach, which is an opioid treatment center, and Dr. Mark Rubenstein, who is the director of the Palm Beach County Medical Society. The main takeaways from this meeting was that the medical part, the drug part of the opioid epidemic is only 10% of the problem. And Dr. Alonso spent quite a bit of time describing the behavioral health aspects of the epidemic and the county, what the county and its 60 partners are doing, and what we can do individually to make a difference in this area. Information on how you can get involved with that is on the Palm Beach County Health Department website. Another takeaway is that the fire department countywide is now providing mental health counseling for first responders who are dealing with this situation on a daily basis. The tendency is becoming for them to normalize what they're seeing in the field, and as Chief De Jesus emphasized, this is not normal. Help is also available for people who don't have insurance through the Healthcare District of Palm Beach County. They're on the forefront of using medically assisted detox with psychosocial follow-up to help patients. Another important part, doctors have to be retrained about the potential for addiction with these meds. And on July 1st, thanks to House Bill 21, 2018, will go into effect, limiting the number of pills a physician can prescribe for acute pain to a 3-day supply, requiring them to do a 2-hour continuing education course on opioid addiction, and requiring them to check the PDMP or the prescription drug database before writing a prescription for controlled substances. So thanks again to Representative Roth and the legislature for taking the time. This was another bill besides the Stoneman Douglas bill that took a long time to get done. Also, we have to realize there's a patient expectation that we should be able to be pain-free, and that's not realistic. With certain conditions and advancing age, some pain is to be expected and other modalities should be pursued. We need more money spent on illness and injury prevention, so treatment's not needed. And the biggest thing was that every single one of us is at risk for becoming addicted to these meds, even though there are risk factors that predispose some more than others. None of us should take any of these medications unless absolutely necessary for the shortest time possible. Never give them to friends and family. Make sure they're secure so that children, family members, household workers don't have access. As many times, that is where the addiction starts. Medication that's been quote unquote taken from someone else. And dispose of your unused narcotic medications by turning them into the police department. Each of us needs to be part of the solution to this problem.
Well done. Thank you. Carl,
Yes, ma'am.
would you like to?
Here, I'm present.
What items of resident interest and/or board committee reports would you like to give this evening?
Well, usually you guys know I like to go a different direction with it, but Rochelle, excellent. Thank you. I am going to report on some things that I did this month. One of the, I went to a golf tournament, and it's a golf tournament that is close to me. It was about a child named Caitlin Kazanjian that got killed in a vehicle homicide in the city of Palm Beach Gardens many, many years ago. It's close to me because I was the homicide investigator in the case, along with my partner, Jeff Main, who's now retired as well. So every year, her parents put on a tournament, which is hosted by the city of Palm Beach Gardens, and it's all cops. It's all my brothers and sisters. Mayor showed up for a little while, thank you. And out of 300 police officers that showed up and played that day, we raised $40,000 in one day for the Caitlin Kazanjian Fund, which funds college kids, school, and so on. So that's something that we do every year, and I'm very proud that the city sponsors that. Moving on with other things, I attended 6 separate meetings with PGA Corridor and chamber members. The still hot topic in the city going on for the year forward is still traffic. It's still the major issue, And a lot of things, whether this council will be here or not in the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of changes in the city with I-95, PGA, Military Trail, North Lake, obviously the Beeline, and North Lake, Military Trail, PGA Boulevard, military on Central Boulevard on I-95. And that's right off the top of my head. So that's coming down the pipe. One thing that I did do that is completely unique to what my other council members have not done is in my private world, I work very closely with many law firms, probably about 150 law firms. We do work all over the country. The reason why I'm saying that is there's a lot of attorneys that are running for judge. They're going to be elected this year. And one of my good friends and an attorney who's also running for judge is Maxine Cheeseman. She's one of my clients. It's not a shout out for her. She doesn't know. I had no idea you were going to be here. So I wanted to make sure that the judges know that council members, the attorneys that are running for judge, that we're paying attention to them too. Not just our state representatives. We're paying attention to the attorneys that are going to be representing the county because we as a city go in front of these judges. Luckily, most of the people that are running for judge are already my clients and friends. So it's a relationship that I wanted to make sure that I was in front of them, knowing that I support whoever runs. We got a lot of good people running for judge. I'll move on from that. We have this little thing called Ironwood Park that myself and Maria, before you guys came on, and I wasn't going to mention it, but Mike Martino wrote something positive in the PBG Watch. It was nice for him to say something about it. It's a little teeny park on Ironwood and Holly Drive, right across the street from Jupiter Elementary School. Oh, is it Gardens? I'm sorry, Gardens Elementary School. Oh, God, what's my problem? Sorry. Anyway, Gardens Elementary School. And we still continue to fix it up. We've got some shading. We're finally running some water, some drinking fountain down there. And I just brought it up because it was Mike Martino. When I first got elected, he kind of pulled me aside and requested me to kind of push that vision. And luckily, with support of Maria and former Mayor Eric Jablin and staff, it's unbelievably beautiful. So to sum it up, went to Governmental Affairs Committee, which was regarding the Indiantown Road Bridge. So that I didn't need to go to. District Park, as you know, speaking of parks, I love the children. We love the parks. We support our soccer, our baseball big time. And we're just breaking ground on 82 acres of parks, of soccer fields out west off of 117th and Central. And then the chamber meeting for the natural disasters. So normally I don't do a lot of this reporting exactly where I go, but this month I wanted to share with what exactly I did. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carl. Mark.
Usual kind of events, Economic Forum, Chamber Breakfast, NCNC. I did attend the Palm Beach North Healthcare Committee's opioid discussion with Rochelle the other day, and it was a different type of discussion than last year. Last year was really just talking about the horrors that first responders are seeing on the streets. This meeting was a little bit more advanced, and it kind of took it to the next level and seeing some of, I don't want to say progress, but some of the changes that are being done. But at the end of the day, this is really about how we as individuals can talk to our families, our children, our neighbors, and try to protect each other from the addiction that the opioids can cause. And I don't know what the answer is. I go home and I give my kids a hug, even though they don't want it from me anymore, but I still give it to them. North County Park was a wonderful event. I don't know where the pictures are, but my boys are the ones with their Predators jerseys on, so I hope that is a big splash so I can embarrass them somewhere or sometime. And also just a lot of conversations. I received a number of emails, phone calls from some of the members, some of the residents of Steeplechase. I spoke with 5 or 6 people today, responded to a number of emails. Some other calls came in this afternoon, so I apologize I didn't get a chance to call you back. But I think what we all try to do is try to stay as close to the residents on a daily basis as we can, and that was basically my month. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to read my list. Here's my list. Everything plus, but there were a couple.
But it's really big font, though.
And so I could read. I could read. You know. I could read it this way. First and foremost, though, I do want to thank all who made the Gardens District Park a reality, as we were able to, as Carl said, break ground this month, and Mark and Rochelle and Matthew were there. The city looks forward to the completion of the park next year, so we can accommodate the throngs of soccer players we have in our area, and also a much-needed district park that will accommodate kids from all over. And as you've heard us say before, I think Daniel, you can correct me, 40% of the kids that play in our parks right now are not from the city of Palm Beach Gardens. So we were happy to partner with the county on this district park. I had the opportunity to talk with Adam Putnam about the opioid crisis, and a takeaway, to follow up on what Rochelle said, a takeaway on that, which was something that was really scary for me, was how much the insurance companies can stand to lose before they blink an eye. They lose $40 million on urine tests before they blink an eye. So let's go after the funding sources for some of this stuff, and we need to put a little more emphasis on the mental health. So, you know, when we talk about bills in the future that have to do with opioid, we need a mental health component to that. And the normal, usual suspects, the Transportation Planning Agency, blah, blah, blah. But I would like to say that State Road 7 from 60th to North Lake Boulevard will be under construction this summer. They have the funding, and it is going to happen this summer. And I'd also like to give a shout out to the South Florida Honor Flight Program. I was honored to be a judge in a buck-off challenge that raised money for the honor flight. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because another judge who sat there with me was a 93-year-old World War II veteran. He had the honor of taking the honor flight, and it did, as his granddaughter said to me, it changed his life. And you can find Carmen working at Home Depot on North Lake, 93 years old. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that. And lastly, I'd like to thank James Gelfand and the staff at the Dancing Crane at Sand Hill Crane. I went to the Easter brunch there, and they did a wonderful job, and they couldn't have been more accommodating. And I have to say, I was excited to talk to the other people that were there, and they were residents of the newly annexed Bay Hill Estates, Preserve at Bay Hill, Rustic Lakes, members from Osprey Isles and Carlton Oaks. So I really believe we have a jewel in our western corner there, and I invite all of you in the public to go and visit it for golf and food. So lots of other stuff, but I'm going to move on because we have a lot more things on the agenda. The next item on the agenda would be comments from the public. And for subjects not on the agenda, if your cards haven't been submitted, you're too late. So first off, I have Don Herring. Don, did you leave? You left. All right, well, if you went to the restroom, we'll come back. Tom DeRita. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. For the record, Tom DeRita, 5770 Whirlaway Road, Palm Beach Gardens, a resident of Palm Beach Gardens for 31 years and 30 years in Steeplechase, and representing Steeplechase. I want to thank everybody here in the city for everything they've done for us, and I want to go back a little bit to the previous work we did with Mr. Ferris in 2007, 2008, when we were able to procure $3 million for the Turnpike exit entrance ramp on Jog Road. And I want to congratulate Matt for coming up here and explaining how difficult it is to get things done when you see we only have 3 to 4 months to get 3,247 bills, which have to be reviewed. And his explanation was excellent, so maybe the residents would understand how difficult it is to get some of these things accomplished and how interesting it is and how you have a city that works so hard. And we're lucky to have probably the best city in the state of Florida. So the cooperation we've received in the past, we're very happy to believe we are going to get the same cooperation. And we're talking about the extension road and the expansion that Beeline Highway is going to do, which abuts our southern boundary to Steeplechase. 324 homes, plus a few extra lots that are there, and these homes sit on 1.25 acres each home. And the noise abatement that we're concerned about is going to be from the road encroaching, and I want to thank, I believe at least 2 or 3 of the council members and mayor and vice mayor have been out to Steeplechase to review how close the grades are. The grade of the road is higher than the embankment coming to the small berm that we currently have. This is going to create a considerable hardship for Steeplechase in many respects. We're going to have issues if we're not able to get FDOT to provide the wall and the berm that we need. We're going to have a possibility of lost revenues for our values of our homes, number one. The safety factor, and I believe that at the last meeting, Chief Stepp at the time, and now the Assistant City Manager, got up and talked about the safety issues that are going to happen if we don't get this wall built. Right now, you can climb over the wall that's currently there. When you bring the road in and they put in a sidewalk and they put in a bike lane, we're going to be on top of that, our subdivision. And as you know, it's a gated subdivision that it's the third largest, I believe, in Palm Beach Gardens, and the amount of money and taxation is considerable. So we're going to have those issues. The sound issues, when people tell us that the density may not be, because we have such large lots, we have a problem with that. At 3:20 every morning, I hear the train. You hear the traffic on North Lake Boulevard. So we have a sound engineer that we're talking with to probably be able to bring that up to. You want me to go away?
No, well, yes and no. If you don't mind, as you said, and it's not customary for us to comment when someone is at the podium, but like Mark said, we have gotten the emails, we have gotten the phone calls. I haven't responded to any because I wanted to talk to the city manager this evening before I called and responded. And I did respond to Mike Mitrione and said, you know, there will be a resolution to this. Not a resolution as in we're going to do a resolution that's up for council discussion, but there will be something that is going to happen in the future. And it is in all of our purview, and it is in my purview too as a representative with the Transportation Planning Agency. So we are going to do our best to accommodate and help. I can't promise what we're going to do. I know on the phone with you yesterday, you said that you had helped procure several millions of dollars the last time, and as I said to you on the phone yesterday, well, go after it now. You know? But I'm not cutting you off, but I am going to continue the discussion at a later time.
Okay. And I want to thank the residents from Steeplechase who took their time out tonight to be here also. So you can see that we have quite a few people that are very concerned about their values and concerned about getting a resolution, which I don't believe is a difficult thing to do at this point in time. Yes, ma'am.
I'm cutting you off.
Thank
Only because I actually try to stay to the 3-minute rule for everybody. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
I just want to thank you for coming and know that you are doing this at the right time. Long before before the road is being built, you've already started the conversation with the city and the staff, and that's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, Maxine Cheeseman.
Maxine Cheeseman, 1818 South Australian Avenue, West Palm Beach, Florida. Congratulations, Mayor and Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here before you. I'm a candidate. I'm running for Circuit Court Judge in West Palm Beach. It's all over West Palm Beach. Election is August 28th, and you've heard that already tonight. I'm here just to introduce myself to you and to the residents and just let you know a little bit about my background. I've had 13 plus years in legal, as a legal profession. I have my own law practice, and I've been doing that for the last 13 years. Prior to that, I was a scientist. I have a master's degree in organic chemistry, and I've done several years' work of environmental science. So I bring that to the bench. I bring to the bench, hopefully I get there, my scientific background, my environmental experience, and my legal career. I also do a lot of public service. I'm totally committed to the community. I've been here most of my life. I came originally from Jamaica and lived here longer than I've lived there. So I'm totally dedicated to the community, and I have had countless awards for community service. And I'm going to leave you tonight after the meeting. I'll leave you with some pamphlets where you can read about me and call me if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Paula Magnuson.
I didn't know I had to hand these in.
You can
I can give it to the clerk. Thank you.
to the clerk, please.
Paula Magnuson, 3167D Gardens East Drive. As a president and liaison for 11 years for my community, I'm attempting to establish what the city considers abuse or harassment, which may be just frustrations or venting to city workers that are paid by our tax dollars. The censorship of my emails began when I asked for a meeting to discuss a much-needed crosswalk or pedestrian right-of-way for disabled taxpayers and senior citizens. Is it my constant complaining about the excessive speeding on the street, anywhere from 35 to 80 miles per hour daily? We have no protection if a speeding car loses control. We have no barriers to protect our homeowners. Is it the complaint of a dumpster in full view on the street, which creates an eyesore, while other communities are in compliance in keeping their dumpsters hidden from view? Is it a complaint about a correction notice to mulch while neighboring communities had not received a correction notice to mulch, which is considered selective enforcement? I have made at least 5 attempts to get copies of the alleged abusive emails. I received 2 responses, both of them stating no records responsive to my request, censoring and blocking a taxpayer from government websites, and ability to communicate with city staff without just cause is not in the best interest of all parties involved, nor is it for the greater good of the city and all taxpayers. I have submitted a records request to each council member so that you may assist in resolving this matter of censorship. Thank you, and congratulations, Carl.
Thank you. At this time, I have no more cards, so I will close the public portion of the agenda and bring up the city manager for the city manager report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Congratulations to everyone. The first thing I'd like to bring to your attention, as I'm sorry everyone left from Steeplechase, but we've been informed by representatives from FDOT that they will be unable to meet with us at the May special meeting that we called for 6 o'clock. Their studies on the noise wall barrier will not be completed in time to address the council in May. They've asked to be rescheduled and come back in June when they have all the results from their noise study, which should provide some answers to the very questions that the residents were looking for here tonight. So with that, with your permission, I will reschedule them for June 7th to come back and give us the results of their study, so that we will know what direction to go in, if that's okay.
That'd be great. Everybody else okay with that?
Everybody okay?
Is this at 6 o'clock p.m.? Is that
6 o'clock would be good.
Perfect. Thank you. Next, anything else?
Next is, it doesn't give us a great deal of pleasure to do what we're about to do, but...
Can I say something, City Manager?
Okay.
I'd like to use this time right now because we've heard from citizens and we've heard from the city manager, and now we're going to now move forward on readdressing DOT's figures at a later month. I would like to take this moment while it's still right in front of us to discuss the issue of steeplechase and make a choice at what we can do and can't do. Is that?
No, let's bring that up at the end of the meeting when we have a discussion.
Yeah, I thought that too, but
especially since they're gone. So
I get you there too.
Okay. Let's let Ron finish.
We'll do it then.
Yeah, we'll bring it back up.
Okay, once again, it's my pleasure. It doesn't give us a great deal of pleasure to do what we're about to do. I wish there was a different way of handling these issues. But, you know, at numerous meetings and with numerous phone calls and emails, council as well as staff have heard about Paula Magnuson's issues and Kevin and Carol Easton's complaints regarding the city, the council, and the staff. We have sat here meeting after meeting, and staff has remained silent at those council meetings so that we don't escalate the situations that they bring to you every month. But at the February council meeting, council did direct staff to address those complaints from the two of them. Since both of the issues that the two of them bring to the council span many, many, many years, and with this council being relatively new to their issues, the explanation presented here tonight, it's going to be necessary to provide you with the history and the background of these individual issues. We find it very difficult in this short presentation to capture what the city and previous councils and employees have had to experience over the years with these issues and these individuals. In order to fully address them, the issues, and cover several years, it's necessary to involve many, 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 many staff members. We've also got the assistance of our assistant city attorney. So this has caused us to spend many hours and dollars in order researching and bringing back together history, facts, and facts-based history on these issues. Now, Paula Magnuson, even tonight, has complained that her emails have been blocked and that phone calls have been denied and phone messages not returned. After receiving numerous complaints from city employees and their supervisors, citywide, about excessive amount of time being spent dealing with the volume of phone calls and emails about relevant and irrelevant issues, about the rudeness, the discourteous language, and after reviewing the employees' complaints and confirming with the city manager my own discussions with the employees were authorized to block emails and block phone calls. Paula Magnuson received the following message when she attempted to email our city. The email has been blocked due to your abuse of the system. Any further communications must be via email, U.S. mail, or hand delivery. This message has been delivered to her 16 times since December. She should have noted that these phone calls were made to the city. I would like for you to note that how many different departments are affected by these phone calls. Phone calls take an extensive amount of time. Administration has been called, code enforcement, city clerk, city hall reception, construction services, dispatch, police department, planning and zoning, the city forester, building department, legal department, IT, public works. At one point in time, and we stopped counting since then, it was over 20 hours of phone time with Paula. It's excessive, it's abusive, and with the information provided to you here tonight, I hope you will see the same as we do. In regards to Kevin and Carol Easton's issues, those will be addressed in the presentation, but keep in mind these a span of time that this covers is from 2002 to current time, arguing the same issues. Here to illustrate the results of the findings of our research are the following presenters: Deputy City Manager Steve Stepp, City Engineer Todd Engel, and Assistant City Attorney Abigail Jornby. She is the one who prosecutes all code enforcement cases. With that introduction, I would like to introduce to you now Deputy City Manager Stephen Stepp and his information and research.
Good evening. Ms. Magnuson publicly stated that the city blocks her email and refuses to respond to her requests, her complaints, and issues. Ms. Magnuson has 3 known separate email addresses and aliases. This report will demonstrate the volume, tone, and the nature of some of these incidents. When we look back a little more than a year or so ago, you see a large volume of activity, 181 emails, 340 phone calls, 31 voicemails, 17 police calls, and 6 public records requests. It's an abuse of resources that could be used to better serve and protect our citizens. Over the years, every command staff member has actually asked me on the police department if they could try to make a difference between her and her neighbors. Each time, after weeks or months of trying, they would come back and say that she just won't let up on her hate for certain people and refuse to stay away from them. Her tone is often abusive and highly inflammatory towards staff. Examples include calling us Nazis. At times, she'll call us to her house to complain and then order us off her property. And then after years of trying to work with her, you get comments like, "You work for taxpayers and acted like a typical liberal with no patience. Do your job." Ms. Magnuson is consistently the antagonist and not the victim here. My interactions personally date back 15 years with her. As the chief of police, I met with her numerous times for up to hours in my office, as well as phone calls and emails. Over the years, it became obvious that she would set her sights on someone she doesn't like and then try to use the city to exert her power and authority. Some would be her friends for a couple of years, and then they would become her enemy the next year. And once she set her sights on you, she would not stop. We have tried numerous times to mitigate and create harmony in her community, but she refuses. One example that you see on the top there is the hose incident. And basically what happened there is she had a neighbor that she would confront regularly. She would go by this neighbor's house and loiter in the area. Sometimes she would park her car or stop her car. Horns would blow, just an intimidation factor, sometimes on foot, hanging out in front by the fence area. When the neighbor would come out to water their flowers, sometimes the hose would extend over and she would get squirted with the hose. She would call the police and insist that we arrest this person. We'd go there, we'd try to talk to her. I personally spoke to her and asked her, "Why do you have to go around this person? Can't you just stay away? It's not in line with your house. You go out of your way to hang out by them." And her answer is, "It's my right. You can't stop me. I know my constitutional rights. I can go hang out there if I want." She'll show up with cameras, video cameras, filming the neighbor. This is what typically happens, on and on. There are many, many other examples, and they're ongoing. The latest example is a complaint that was filed about a commercial vehicle that was parked in her designated spot. There was some concern that they were charging rent for this commercial vehicle to be in the spot, which is a code violation. When confronted, she says, "I know who the vehicle owner is, but I'm not telling you." So there's zero cooperation there. Again, not the victim, but the antagonist. They're about to be cited or have been cited again for this code violation, which is going to go to their entire committee at the HOA. Another recent incident occurred at City Hall on March 5th. Ms. Magnuson, as part of a group, staged a spectacle in the City Hall lobby with cameramen, equipment, and other individuals, demands to see the council as well as the city clerk. The group aggressively confronted our lobby staff. A microphone was shoved in one of our staff members' face who believed she was assaulted and forced to shield herself with a folder. No employee should be treated this way. This was an effort to intimidate and harass our employees. Had the police responded just a few seconds earlier, some of them may have been arrested for assault or for disrupting the employees from doing their government work. Further, Ms. Magnuson entered the building hiding a heavy object under a black cloth. Our staff member testified that she was fearful for her safety. The object was a trophy in the shape of a toilet bowl that she had made it as an award for the most corrupt city council. This was just a staged spectacle specifically engineered to disrupt city business. It was used to intimidate, bully, and harass our staff. In this picture, you can see Ms. Magnuson concealing an object under the black cloth. You also see another individual aggressively reaching over the counter and shoving a microphone in our employee's face, almost hitting her in the mouth. Again, an inordinate amount of city resources are expended time after time compared to virtually any of the other 53,000+ residents that we deal with on a regular basis. These people typically act in a rude and aggressive manner that harasses and intimidates our employees. Here she is with her unveiled gold toilet bowl trophy for the most corrupt council award, demanding again to see the council and then the city clerk, acting very proud and laughing and even chanting for our city clerk. Eventually, they were asked by the police to leave the lobby where they were disrupting the employees' work and the business of the city. Members from the rest of this group were outside with signs and almost giddy about their disruption. As those inside were asked to leave the building, here comes Kevin Easton to join them with a big smile and a thumbs-up signal to Ms. Magnuson and her group. That takes us to our ongoing dealings with Mr. Kevin Easton and his wife Carol, who claim that we've been out to get them since 1997. The problem is we didn't annex the property till 5 years later in 2002. Our city engineer and our city attorney will further explain.
Good evening, Council. Todd Engel, city engineer. I'm going to start off with a little historical perspective. Sunset Drive and 40th Terrace, along with Mary Circle and Gardens Oaks, was annexed under Ordinance 31, 2002. And adopted with that ordinance was an urban service report that identified the level of service for those communities. Sunset Drive, 40th Terrace, and Mary Circle were identified as being deficient in roadways and not having public water and not having public sewer. So they were identified in there, but there was no change to the level of service during the annexation. So through the annexation process, the city didn't even assume responsibility for the Mary Circle, Sunset Drive, or 40th Terrace right away because they were deficient and it didn't meet our code. So there was no anticipation of the city providing those services to those residents at the time of annexation. Since the time of annexation, Kevin Easton has been on a campaign to get water, sewer, and roadway improvements for those areas, particularly the Sunset and 40th Terrace, where he owns 5 particular lots in those areas. At the time of annexation, when we were going through the process, there were several residents with Mary Circle, Sunset, and 40th Terrace that were very concerned that the city would force those improvements on them, change their way of life, and it's something that they couldn't afford at the time. So they actually stood up and said, we will not be for this annexation if you force us to go into water and sewer and roadway improvements for the area. So they were fearful that they couldn't afford that. So Kevin Easton at some point demanded that the city pay for those improvements out of our funds. It was determined by a previous council that the city will not use public funds to fund private lot improvements such as roadway, water, and sewer that particularly only improve those individual lots. With that, council directed us to try to find other means of funding. So the city applied for several grants, several state appropriations, of which we did not receive any of those. But we tried probably 5 or 6 particular times to get funding to help these communities, both Mary Circle, Sunset, and 40th Terrace. It's that time council directed staff to come up with a mechanism. How can we help them fund these improvements? Knowing that we can't pay for them, they directed us to come up with a mechanism to do so. So staff created a neighborhood improvement assessment program which provided funding for those improvements, in which they will pay back over assessments of the property over a given period of time depending on the improvements. Through that program, we sent out questionnaires to the community on what type of improvements they would like to see and would they be willing to fund those improvements. Sunset Drive and 40th Terrace chose to go with a roadway improvement and a water-only program, stating that the sewer would be too much burden for those properties to carry. So we implemented that program, and we started design and construction for the roadway and water improvements on Sunset Drive and 40th Terrace. During the design and review process, Kevin Easton stood up at several public meetings and stated that he will be willing to go get any easements necessary from any of the property owners free of charge, that the community was behind us and he was willing to go get those on our behalf free of charge. Well, that never happened. I ended up going to get all those easements myself once the design was complete. We completed the design, identified all the areas that required either fire hydrant easements, water loop easements, or roadway improvement easements. And the fact was that we did receive free of charge all the easements necessary in the entire community, with the exception of Kevin Easton's property. Kevin Easton was provided the documentation and refused to sign them, and stated he needed to be paid for those easements, both for the water loop and some roadway improvements easements that were necessary for the project. It's that time that the city was instructed to go get an appraisal in fair market value, and myself, the city attorney, and the deputy city clerk approached Kevin Easton at his properties in question, made an offer of fair market value, again, which he refused to accept and sign. Council then directed staff to go through the eminent domain proceedings, in which we filed the paperwork. We were directed through a judge to go to mediation, and we did settle and finally obtain deeds to those properties through the mediation process. The fact is that we ended up paying $75,000 for those particular easements that we needed, in which was stated we would get those free from Kevin Easton. And that will be charged back, because it is an assessment program, to each of those individual parcels that are involved in there. There's 61 parcels in total. Each parcel had to pay an additional $1,233 to obtain those property in order to complete the improvements of the project. Kevin also stated, or Kevin, both Easton stated, that we made unfair arrest. It was determined, in order to make the water loop and to create the cul-de-sac at the end of 40th Terrace, per our code and per the right-of-way that we received from Palm Beach County, that some of the trees need to be removed. At the time, the Eastons claimed that the tree was on their property, in which they still claim that today, and they claim that they went to jail unfairly for trying to save a 200-year-old tree on their property. They stated that they were treated like criminals. The fact is that the diagram that you see there today, the blue is all of Kevin Easton's 5 parcels that he owns down at the end of Sunset and 40th Terrace. The red represents the right-of-way that the city received for 40th Terrace from Palm Beach County. The yellow line represents the FDOT wall. The blue circle with a star in it is the actual tree in question. And the blue line that runs through that represents the water main loop that was going to be installed. Per Seacoast standards, Seacoast Utility Authority is going to own and operate these once we completed the construction. We're in charge of the construction. They'll take over maintenance in the long run. Requires that trees not be that close to the water lines, and furthermore that the trees would also encroach into our cul-de-sac that was recently constructed in the area. Okay. On the date that the tree was scheduled to be removed, the Eastons stopped the construction process. They got in the way of our construction workers in front of the tree. They called the media, and subsequently we called the police. The police department showed up, and not only that, Chief Stepp personally showed up to try to mitigate the issues, to ensure that we can resolve the issues in a meaningful manner. and I'll let Steve Stepp go through the process that he did to mitigate those circumstances.
So when that occurred that day, I was at the police station, got a call from a supervisor that was on the scene along with a few officers. It said they were blocking the work crew from removing the tree. They had been put on notice that the tree was coming down. The work needed to be done. The crews were out there. They refused, insisted that they wanted to go to jail. A member or two of our command staff started heading that way, and I said, I'm going to go out there myself. So I went out, saw Kevin and Carol Easton out there, spoke to them, explained that, again to them that the tree had to come down. It was coming down that day. It had been scheduled for a while. They were aware of it, and that it wasn't going to do any good for them to get arrested. It was just going to add to the situation. It was going to cost them more. It was going to cause a criminal record, and they were insistent that they wanted to go to jail. I asked him to think about it for a few minutes, tried as best I could to talk him out of doing that. Gave him a few minutes. About that time, media was arriving, and there was a helicopter overhead from the media. Tripods were being set up down the street. Cameras were being mounted, and we stepped back. Around that time, the city attorney showed up. He contacted Mr. Easton's attorney and attempted to reason with them and to get them to comply and move out of the way. After spending about 30 minutes there, they decided, no, they're going to jail. The media was all set up, and they were ready to go. They started arguing back and forth, Kevin and Carol, as to who was going to go to jail. And in the end, Kevin agreed that Carol should be the one to go to jail. And he, well, for whatever reason, and then he, as she was being taken into custody, he ran over to the media and started a press conference, which was clearly nothing, in my mind, but a publicity stunt. This was their choice and their timing, and there was no unfair treatment. We went out of our way. Like I said, I went there personally and did everything but beg them not to make this a criminal activity. They decided to make it that way, and we went out of our way. The Eastons claim that the city makes money off their neighborhood. To put it in perspective, since the annexation, the city has responded to 316 fire rescue calls, over 5,000 police incidents, 278 code enforcement cases. Last year, the city collected less than $30,000 in ad valorem taxes from that neighborhood. Since annexing into the city, the combined neighborhood saved approximately $22,000 per year by being incorporated into the city compared to being in unincorporated Palm Beach County. So in effect, the property owners saved on taxes compared to being with the county, and moreover, the city gets little tax dollars compared to the inordinate amount of expensive city resources that are used to serve this area. I'll now turn it over to our city attorney for additional information.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. As it relates to the code enforcement activity in this particular neighborhood, since 2002, we've had 278 code enforcement cases. That is for the entire neighborhood. 38 of those cases involve Mr. Easton's 5 properties. He does own 5 in that neighborhood. So statistically, that would be Mr. Easton owns 7.9% of the properties in the neighborhood, but accounts for 13.6% of all code cases generated. Most properties and most residents, when cited with code enforcement, comply and don't even come to a hearing. Procedurally, a typical code enforcement case begins with a notice of violation, and the individual is given time to comply. If for some reason they fail to comply, they come to a violation hearing, and then later, if they still do not comply, they come to a fine assessment hearing and are assessed a fine. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is basically a cross-section of just 4 cases of Mr. Easton's properties. As we can see, that it typically takes Mr. Easton about 5 months or almost 130 days to bring the properties into compliance. The city sees this as a pattern of deliberate and willful noncompliance by Mr. Easton. Here are some cross-sections of some photographs of the violations on Mr. Easton's properties. These are properties that code enforcement obviously had to address. Once again, the claim by Mr. Easton is that we are selectively enforcing and engaging in selective enforcement against only him. As we take a look at the next couple slides of the photos, obviously these are violations of our city code that have to be addressed. It is clear we are not engaging in selective enforcement. It is notable that currently the city is working on 3 additional cases, new cases for Mr. Easton's properties, once again addressing similar code sections that have already been cited for. And this is our last photo. Once again, just a cross-section, the sampling of some of the violations that code enforcement staff has had to go out, notice Mr. Easton, and bring him to a hearing. And like all the residents, when we bring a code enforcement case, a typical case, they have an opportunity to comply. So if Mr. Easton complies before we even have to go to a hearing, there are no fines, there are no administrative costs. Next slide. Mr. Easton consistently brings up 2 particular recent litigation cases. This involved foreclosure cases. What were these 2 cases about? It was about a gazebo that was unpermitted structure that was actually placed straddling a single property line, 2 parcels, in violation of the setback rules. As I discussed earlier, as I mentioned, we cited Mr. Easton and gave him a chance to comply. Notably, Mr. Easton hired an attorney, and that attorney requested a meeting with myself, Max Lohman, Bahari Wolf's planning and zoning staff, to go over what the violation in these 2 cases was about. We actually did sit down and meet with Mr. Easton's attorney and with staff in order to go detail by detail, step by step, as to how he could comply the properties. Mr. Easton refused to comply and was brought to code enforcement for both properties because he was in violation of the setback code. At that time, the magistrate gave Mr. Easton additional time to comply. If he did not comply, he would be assessed a fine up to $250 a day. At the fine assessment hearing, at that time, he still had not complied, and he was actually assessed $150 per property per day. After 2 years of deliberate noncompliance by Mr. Easton, the fines totaled $151,000 and change. At that time, it was decided that we would bring this forward for foreclosure proceedings. So that is why we had this litigation. So if we could just go to the next slide, we can see pretty much the procedure and the process for a code enforcement case. This is 8342 Sunset Drive. This is a gazebo setback violation. And once again, the staff issues a notice of violation on September 25th, 2015. The staff is required under state law to give Mr. Easton time to comply, which we did. Once he does not follow through with that request to comply, we issue a notice of hearing. So at that time, he's brought to a violation hearing before the special magistrate. The special magistrate reviews all our case evidence and information to determine whether, yes, actually we have a violation, which of course the magistrate in this case did. At that time, the magistrate gives Mr. Easton additional time to comply up to November 28th or be assessed up to a $250 a day fine. Mr. Easton refused to comply. At that time, a hearing for fine assessment was held in January of 2016, and a fine of $150 a day was assessed. If we move to the next slide, you'll see similar companion case. Essentially, the same process was followed. Once again, a violation hearing, fine assessment hearing, noncompliance, and the fines start to run. In the end, this fine was approximately $151,000. If we could move to the next slide, please. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So, because the city initiated foreclosure proceedings in the circuit court, we were attempting to foreclose on the properties in order to get the lien money that was owed to us. Part of that, the circuit court required the city to attend mediation with Mr. Easton. At this mediation, both parties were represented by attorneys. Mr. Easton had his attorney. Max Lohman went to on our behalf of our city and to this mediation. And this, essentially, mediation is not required that the parties settle the case. This is an attempt to settle the case. So essentially, the parties meet, they see if they can settle. That's what the judge wanted us to do. Well, lo and behold, we did actually settle the case. Both parties voluntarily entered into an omnibus global settlement agreement. In this settlement agreement, the city forgave $110,000 of our liens in order to resolve this case and both cases with Mr. Easton. If you go to the next slide, please. And notably, a key element of that agreement provided that Mr. Easton hereby unconditionally and irrevocably releases and forever discharges the city and all of its present and past city council members from any and all claims and demands whatsoever, and any statutory claim for the relief of any nature, and agrees not to sue and not to assert against them any such claims or demands or any other causes of action in any court or before any agency or commission of a local, state, and federal government arising, alleged to have risen based on any set of facts, known or unknown, occurring prior to and including the date of the agreement. That date was November 17, 2017. Once again, this was voluntarily entered into by Mr. Easton with his own attorney present. So by the very fact that Mr. Easton continues to bring up the fact that he paid $40,000, is upset about this agreement, he voluntarily entered into this agreement, and then by the fact he's even bringing it up is in violation of his own word. He's in violation of the agreement that he voluntarily executed. Next slide. One other claim Mr. Easton continues to make is that nobody is watching code enforcement. He's requesting City Council to step in and oversee the process. We follow state law. Chapter 162 Florida statute sets out code enforcement procedures and regulations, and it does not involve City Council involvement. Specifically, it is supposed to be an independent administrative body. And we have a magistrate, he is independent, and he makes those determinations. He reviews the cases, and he determines whether there's a violation and whether a fine is appropriate. This is all by state law, and it does not require City Council involvement, and in fact, does not allow City Council involvement. If we may go to the next slide, please. He also indicates he's disgruntled because we do not have anyone watching code enforcement and that there needs to be some oversight. I would like to make a point that there is actually an appellate procedure. So if a resident is brought before a code enforcement case and is found to be in violation and assessed a fine, there's a procedure that that resident, if he feels that it's unfair, he can actually appeal to the circuit court judge, to the circuit court of Palm Beach County, and have three-panel judge members review the case, the evidence, and determine whether it was actually a fair proceeding. And Mr. Easton, in the past, has actually afforded himself of this very process.
Mayor and Council, as you can see, I hope you can see here, and you're quite aware of the fact that the city has an obligation to enforce its codes. And if we didn't enforce these codes, we'd be accused of selective enforcement on the other side. So with that said, of the Kevin Easton issue, I want you to understand, too, that the city has a legal obligation to provide our employees with a safe working environment. That's a safe working environment against all threats, external as well as internal. We also have a legal obligation and a moral obligation to provide our employees a hostile-free workplace. That's hostile-free from exterior as well as interior threats. In today's times and society of some of the events that we see that occur around this nation, we're ever vigilant upon keeping our employees safe and keeping them in a nice work environment. We're not going to allow our employees to be subjected to that type of hostility. We are not going to allow our codes not to be enforced. So I think that with the information that we've provided here, our hope was to better inform you of the history of what has been going on in these two circumstances, and the fact that they keep coming back council meeting after council meeting and we've said nothing. I understand your need for information to understand where this is all coming from. So with that, I'd like to leave you with this thought. We have over 50,000 residents in this city. This past year, our resident survey told us from our residents that we had an approval rating of nearly 90% overall of services provided. Friendliness of staff was at a 97% approval rate. Effectiveness of staff was almost 90%. I think that even, as we look at the employees in the city of Palm Beach Gardens through your own experience and through your own eyes, and through my eyes, I don't see the problem rests with the staff. We will continue to do the best we can with difficult to deal with situations and individuals. These two incidents, again, was brought about at your request because of their continuing to bring these things to you one meeting after another. I guess in a nutshell, after about 40 minutes of explanation, is the report that you requested. And with that, I finish with the city manager's report. And I thank you for listening to all that information.
Thank you, Ron, and it's a lot to digest, and I would ask our council if you have questions to get with Ron later on with those questions. So, next item would be see if we can approve the consent agenda. We're only at the consent agenda. Okay. May I have
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second the motion.
All right, so all those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Thank you, motion carries. All righty, so we are now to the public hearing. Tonight we are holding quasi-judicial hearings on the following case. Resolution 16-2018, Art in Public Places for the Nouveau Business Center at the Gardens. This means that the City Council is required by law to base its decisions on the evidence contained in the recording of this proceeding, which consists of the testimony at the hearing, the materials which are in the official city file on this application, and any documents presented during this hearing. The Council is also required by law to allow cross-examination of any witness who testifies tonight. Cross-examination may occur after the staff, the applicant, and other participants have made their presentations and will be permitted in the order of the witness's appearance. It is necessary that anyone who testifies at the hearing remain until the conclusion of the hearing in order to be able to respond to any questions. If you plan to testify this evening or wish to offer written comments, please fill out a card and give it to the clerk. And at this time, the city clerk will now swear in all persons who intend to offer testimony this evening on any cases.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you. Okay, may I have the clerk read the title, please?
Ordinance 2, 2018, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, amending Chapter 18 Businesses at Article 2, Peddlers and Solicitors, in order to revise the regulations pertaining to solicitors and home solicitation sales, in order to adopt the regulations contained in Chapter 501 Florida statutes, providing definitions, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date, and for other purposes.
I'll open the hearing. Has anything changed since the first reading? Do we need a presentation?
No.
Okay. And I have no cards on this, so I will close the hearing. May I get a motion and a second to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll bring it back for discussion. Any discussion?
No.
Perfect. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Vote passes. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, Resolution 16, 2018. May I have the clerk read the title, please?
Resolution 16, 2018, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, approving art in public places for the Nouveau Business Center at the Gardens Plan Unit Development, PUD, located on the northeast corner of Riverside Drive and Buckeye Street, south of Burns Road, as more particularly described herein, providing conditions of approval, providing an effective date, and for other purposes.
Thank you. I will open the hearing, and because this is quasi-judicial, I would like any ex partes declared, if there were any. No, I just,
No.
Nope, okay, thank you. I know I did sit in briefly at the Art and Public Places meeting, because I had another meeting at the same time here at the city, so I saw a little bit of this presentation, but I look forward to seeing the whole thing.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hello, Mayor and Council. For the record, Mike Sanchez. I'm here representing the property owner. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight.
And you were sworn in, right?
I was sworn in,
Perfect.
yes, ma'am. I have a relatively brief presentation. Also with me here tonight is Mark Fuller, who's the artist on this application. So the Nouveau Business Center at the Gardens is located on Riverside Drive, just south of Burns Road, at the corner of Riverside Drive and Buckeye Street. It's shown here in red. I-95 is to the west on the screen here. It's currently developed with a warehouse building and an office building that was a part of the DeVasta home building operations developed back in the 80s. Both of those buildings will be demolished to accommodate the new project, which you'll see on subsequent slides. Just to put the aerial into context, here's just a few photos of the existing site. Again, these buildings will be developed, but this is the corner of Riverside Drive and Buckeye Street. This is the view from Buckeye Street, and this is the view from Riverside Drive. This is the approved site plan. We were before you back in April of last year to obtain approval of this project. There's two buildings. There's a 100,000 square foot enclosed self-storage building. It's 3 stories. It's a very nice looking building. Both of them are. The building on the corner was approved as a laboratory research and development building. That will be the second building that will be constructed. We have a time frame by when we have to construct that building. We're looking to start demolition of the site to develop all of the site improvements and the self-storage building, which will start here in the next couple of weeks. Riverside Drive is on the left, Buckeye is on the right. There's two access points into the property with a nice retention pond entry feature off of Riverside Drive. Just to show you a few renderings of the two buildings, this is the building on the corner. This is the R&D, which is almost like an office building. And then you have the self-storage building in the back. It's a very nice looking building. Both of them have a similar design with contemporary architecture. This is a rendering of the proposed art. It will be 1/4-inch stainless steel rolled into a spiral column. It has cut-through bird images, and then there are also surface-mounted bird images scattered throughout the art piece. There'll be a 6-inch tall concrete base. The overall structure is about 12.5 feet tall and about 6.5 feet wide, and the intent of the art is to represent a transformation and freedom. This is more of an engineer drawing of the art with the elevations on the bottom and then a plan view at the top. You see the dimensions there. On the top, you see that it is more of a spiral design as opposed to just a perfect circle, and that was designed that way from an aesthetic perspective and also to allow access to the interior of the piece for maintenance and cleaning. It will be uplit at night with 4 LED lights shown at the top of the slide. This is a detail of the bird images. They're about 2 feet wide and 16 inches tall. There was some concern at the Art and Public Places Board meeting about the potentially having some sharp edges and a child going up and cutting themselves. This is 1/4-inch stainless steel, and it will be rounded on all edges, so it will be virtually impossible to go up and cut yourself on that. So it's very thick steel. Just another rendering of the proposed art, and it will be a smooth surface. These lines that you see here is just a part of the computer image, so it will be a clean, nice rolled look around the entire art piece. As far as the location goes, we played around with a few different locations. We were originally planning on doing the art piece at the corner, but there's some existing utilities in that location that will remain. There's also an FP&L easement, so that required the art piece to be very close to the building at the corner there, which will be constructed after the art piece is installed. So we had some concerns with conflicts with the building construction and the art, and plus it would be set back from the corner. We also looked at the south side of the driveway here from Riverside Drive, but there's a monument sign there that would block visibility and some existing utility or some proposed utilities as well. So we decided to move it to the north side of the driveway. We did take into account the FDOT sightline requirements so that a car parked here at this location There would not have any conflict with that art piece to view oncoming traffic, so we actually set it back a couple of feet behind that sight line just to ensure there was no conflicts there. This is a landscape plan. As you can see, the area in front of the art doesn't have any trees or anything blocking it. There'll be some annuals in front of the art piece and then some taller grasses behind it, sort of as a backdrop. As far as the artist, Mr. Fuller has been participating in art since 1992. His artworks include kinetic construction, compression, tension, cable structures, and static freestanding pieces. He does have several art pieces in the city, including transit structures, the 911 Memorial, the Doubletree piece, Skakowski Memorial here outside, and some pieces at Legacy Place and PGA Commons. There was some discussion at the Art and Public Places Board about how we went about the selection and if we considered other artists. I can tell you that we did consider other artists. In fact, we considered 3 other artists before we selected Mr. Fuller. We looked at, and these were all artists that had done work here in the city. We looked at their portfolios. The owners are from Orlando, so they're not familiar with, with any of the pieces here in the city. They had an affinity to Mr. Fuller's art. I've worked with Mr. Fuller in the past, so we started discussions with Mr. Fuller to prepare a preliminary design. He went through a few different iterations of a design, came up with something along the lines of what you're seeing here tonight. The owners were very happy with it, so we decided to move forward with it. So we did go through sort of an informal selection process, and we feel that we met the intent of the ordinance as it relates to privately funded art. As far as the budget, the total required art, and this is based on the vertical construction cost of both buildings on site, is $75,000. When you add up the cost of the art, we're at $84,700, so we're over the art by about $9,000. And before I close, we had submitted a request, which is in the ordinance, in the resolution before you tonight, that the art be installed prior to a date certain, which is July 1st of next year. We started this process a while back, and we figured that was going to give us just a couple of months cushion. Now it's pretty much going to be close to when we expect to get a CO for the storage building, which is what the current Art and Public Places Ordinance requires. So just wanted to make that known that that's before you tonight. And that concludes my presentation. Mr. Fuller and myself will be happy to answer any questions.
The mayor should return in a minute. Mark, you want to act as? No. You're back. Yeah, questions. We're up to questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I was able to hear it in the back of the room while I was trying to get some hot tea and didn't have enough water. So do I have any questions from?
Of course. I actually brought up in my agenda review this morning the safety issues. It's hard to get me out of mom mode sometimes. I noticed that in a lot of the pictures we had from the artist and his other installations, that they are in the middle of high traffic areas where people can experience them up close. And what worried me about this was the birds and the holes between them. And it is close to a residential area, children being there playing on it when nobody is watching, and concerned about what size of a ring actually was around it, what kind of a planting, whether it's enough to say, hey, stay away, or whether it's going to be easy to wade through as opposed to get to it if you wanted to. I mean, you answered the question about the thickness of it, but I think it's a beautiful piece. They're just my concerns. And
sure. So this is, to be honest with you, it would be relatively easy to get to. It's right close to the road. There's sod in front, and that was by design so that you could see the art. There's a small foundation planting, if you will, of just annuals around the base of the art, and the art starts 6 inches above right at the concrete base, which is 6 inches above the ground. We can certainly look at providing some increased landscaping around that just to kind of deter people from getting up close to it. But there's no other means that I can think of to really restrict people from going up to it.
And Mr. Fuller is, and assurances from you that that is not sharp and there is no way that someone is going to, who would go up and just experience it. Oh, how nice these birds are. Look at these, Mom, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they're, Mark Fuller. Yeah, it's 1/4-inch thick stainless steel, which is very hard, and it's got a, you know, really, the edges are deburred. It's not a sharp edge.
Okay.
The lower portions, the bird images are kind of still in the cylinder, into the cylinder form, and as they get up higher, you know, shoulder height, they will be out more. There's not to climb this, if that's like a concern of yours.
We're not as much worried about climbing it as kids sticking their arms in and getting stuck where there's a hole or getting cut on.
Those are fairly large openings. You know, the bottom of the tail would be
It's hard to
probably
tell
something
from
like
here.
this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to tell here, but you know, I don't see it as a
Okay.
blatant, you know, geez, I'm going to get hurt here. Anything's possible.
Like I said, it is a
Yeah,
beautiful
kids are kids.
piece. Just
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do you have any questions? Carl, questions, comments?
You know, with that building and this piece of art is needed on Riverside Drive. Riverside Drive is on the upswing. And Rochelle brings up some concerns, and, you know, kids like to rock climb, and this mirrors a rock climbing thing. And if they get to the top and their arm or leg gets stuck in this bird at the very top of what I'm seeing, that's a concern of mine. Is there a way that we can put some mesh on the inside that would be invisible to the feature as people pass, so it can't be breached by a child that's not using his brain, and next thing you know, you're in a lawsuit because the liability's on you and your design?
You're thinking like a screen of some sort so that that opening is not an opening any longer?
Well, remember, we have 2 elementary schools not a tenth of a mile down from you.
Yeah.
So it's a high traffic of juveniles coming and going, and it leads into the residential area of Holly. There are lots of children that probably pass in front of that, and one of our own city elementary schools is literally 1 block from there. And I'm thinking the potential, just by the percentage of the amount of children that are in the area, it kind of sways that the possibility that something could happen may be possible.
I hear you. Is that a possibility? Yeah, it's a possibility. You could put a screen there or something that closes that opening off. I'm going to suggest something else. If you can see my scale figure next to it. That's roughly a 6-foot guy. We could not do any birds, any openings, you know, that you could get into, but still have a bird form there, a shadow of one or whatever, up to like his shoulder height. So, I mean, a kid's going to, how high would that need to be to prevent a kid from grabbing hold of something to climb? I just see it as an option.
Well, I think the council's showing concern for the children, which is what we do, and I'd rather be proactive than face I told you so later.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where we go with this, Mayor, or Mark, or anybody else.
Well, Mark, you look like you have questions, comments.
I hadn't thought about that, and I apologize. I did not listen to the Arts and Public Places discussion on this item. I don't know. I like to phrase Dr. McCoy from Star Trek, I'm a doctor, not an artist, so I really have no idea. Although I really do enjoy driving through the city and seeing all the different art, and a lot of it coming from you, Mr. Fuller, and it's kind of exciting to see it all. I think that might be a reasonable option if there's a way to make sure the bottom 4 feet doesn't have any protruding structures or pieces where people can get their feet up on and start climbing until you start getting higher up. I don't think that would affect the artistic rendering that you're trying to create. I mean, at the bottom they are more flush anyway, and as they go up, they tend to expand out. So you could probably find a simple solution, I would think. Had there been any discussion about this at Arts and Public Places? Was there?
Not as it relates to children climbing on it, which is certainly a valid concern.
Yeah.
Another option would be, or something that would supplement that, would be to change the annuals to something that would be sort of prickly or something and thick, where at least it would deter people from going in.
Well, I think it's.
You could put glass around the bottom of it.
I think
too.
you can hear from all of us that we're trying to find a way. We all like the art. We're trying to find a way to make sure that it's safe. And I did ask the same question in my agenda review: was how accessible was this going to be, and you know, what was the placement of it and whatnot. So if we can marry the two, make it less accessible, and maybe make the openings small, you know. Smoother on the bottom, graduated, and I do understand this looks like it's 12 feet tall.
It is.
So.
Plus, we don't want to cover the ones on the bottom because you've got light coming through it. Which, if you cover those 4 feet down, then the ambiance of the lower 4 feet is going to disappear. So, on my mind was just making some invisible mesh, which would be an easy fix, non-removable, and some kid can't stick his head or whatever through it.
That still wouldn't prohibit them from climbing.
The climbing, well, I mean, unless you take the birds off, they're going to climb it anyway if one does.
If they're not put in a position to, you know, maybe the coloring could change or something so that you could.
Suppose they were just cutouts with the outlines at that section and then start coming out. I'm not the artist, and it's just something.
We like the artwork. We're just concerned for the kids.
Yes. Sure.
And with the safety of everybody.
Especially in that neighborhood where that's located.
Another option would be, rather than cutting it all the way through, as you're seeing, at least on the bottom section, it could just be perforations, like holes that create that bird form, and then the mounted bird on the surface.
I'd be very comfortable with that. I didn't really even think about it, to be honest with you, but now that we're talking about it, as a young boy, I would always be climbing everything I could find, and that would be a really cool thing to climb if you were a 8-year-old boy or a girl.
I hadn't looked at it as a rock wall, as Carl said. I had not even looked at it that way. I just looked at it from. My question was, how thick were the bird's wings so that kids couldn't cut themselves, because they were going to obviously touch it. So I just thought of the touching. I didn't think of the climbing.
Let's figure it out.
So
if I may make a suggestion,
Thank you.
From staff's perspective, we would be happy, taking into consideration council's comments, to work with the applicant to achieve the desired goal, which is really to prevent children or others from climbing. I think that the suggestion that Mr. Fuller makes of slightly modifying the protrusions to create a graduated system so that one is prohibited from being able to climb it, in addition to the suggestion that the applicant made of ensuring that the annuals that are planted also deter. We can widen the base of the landscaping and look carefully at some species that would be very difficult to go through, such as crown of thorns, et cetera. There's quite a few out there. So we'd be happy to work with them. And if I could suggest that there be a condition of approval added, that within 60 to 90 days of council approval, that the applicant submit the drawings consistent with council discussion, we'd be happy to work with them on those.
I think that would be a great idea, and I think we're a little bit out of order. We didn't do the motion, the second, and all that kind of stuff and bring it back for discussion. Max is shaking his head. So let's do that. Let's make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Let's have a second.
I'll second it.
Bring it back for discussion, and the discussion is we would vote on this with a condition of approval that says you will come. Mr. Fuller, thank you, by the way. I love your artwork. Will come to us again?
No, that within 60 to 90 days that the applicant shall provide staff with the information to ensure that that the proposed art with includes graduated protrusions and modifies the landscaping to prevent children from climbing the art. So essentially, the applicant will work with staff to ensure that this goal is achieved, and we could do this at an administrative level.
Okay, good. All right, so, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you to staff. Have a good day.
Okay, we are now up to resolutions. And I actually do have one card on this, by the way, so may I have the clerk read the title?
Yes, ma'am. Resolution 21, 2018, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, directing the city attorney to draft ballot language to be placed onto the May 3, 2018 City Council agenda for consideration on first reading. Further calling for a special referendum election to be held on August 28, 2018, in conjunction with the Palm Beach County primary election. Further authorizing the mayor to execute a special election agreement with the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections for vote processing equipment use and election services necessary to hold the special referendum election, providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Thank you. And our presentation is?
Yes, ma'am. For the record, Patricia Snyder, City Clerk. I'll be presenting Resolution 21, 2018 for your consideration this evening, which addresses the following. It directs the City Attorney to draft ballot language to present to City Council for first reading. Calls for a special referendum election to be held on August 28, 2018 in conjunction with the Palm Beach County primary election. And it authorizes the mayor to execute a special election agreement with the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections for vote processing equipment use and election services necessary to hold the special referendum election. The timeline for the August 28, 2018 primary election, if council decides to move forward, is tonight. You will direct the city attorney to develop ballot language through the resolution. April 19th, 2018 is the proposed date for a special city council meeting to begin at 6 p.m. for first reading of an ordinance or ordinances with question or questions for the ballot. May 3rd is a regular city council meeting for second reading and adoption of ordinance or ordinances with question or questions for the ballot. May 11th, 2018 is the deadline, which has been determined by the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections, to transmit the ballot language to the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections for inclusion onto the August 28th, 2018 primary election. Staff recommends approval of Resolution 21, 2018 as presented. Any questions?
Thank you. Before we have questions, I have one comment card from Jane Feinstein. Name and address for the record, and thank you for waiting so long to get to this item.
It's a late night for me. Jane Feinstein, 3666 Toulouse Drive, Palm Beach Gardens. So I wanted to speak in support of this resolution. The two questions that were struck from the ballot, question 1 asking if the city charter should be updated for the 21st century, and question 2 asking if term limits should be extended to 3 3-year terms. So in compliance with the city charter's mandate to review the charter every 5 years, a charter review committee was established last August. The committee completed its work, and the result was a series of recommendations to update the charter for the 21st century. Some decision needs to be made as to what to do with those recommendations. The recommendations that were incorporated into the struck question 1 on the March ballot deserve an up or down vote by city residents. If voters think they're sensible recommendations, they'll vote them in, and if they don't, they won't. But they should at least have a shot on the ballot. I've spoken with regard to question 2 in the past. I believe that for the sake of the stability of our city government, continuity and institutional memory, term limits for our council members should be extended to 3 3-year terms. Residents and businesses want stability. It helps us to know what to expect as we plan for our futures. Continuity also promotes stability, and institutional memory helps the council and the staff understand where the city has been, which is key to planning effectively for the future. So three-year terms, in my opinion, will promote stability, continuity, and institutional memory. And it's a question that deserves to be put to the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will bring it back for a motion and a second, and then discussion.
I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 21, 2018.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And now discussion. Any questions? Any discussion? Any comments? Rochelle?
Do we discuss at this time what we're going to ask Max to do for the next ballot questions? I assume that the judge, it's my understanding that the judge kind of prescribed on question number 2 what the language needs to be and how it needs to be written. Max, could you go into that a little bit and explain that from the judgment and what we can expect there?
Sure. The judge did explain, expressed with some specificity on what he thought was needed to be corrected in the ballot, in that ballot language, and that's not that's not that difficult to do. And then as it relates to question 1, he didn't really opine much on question 1, so we'd have to take a look at that and then most likely pull out a couple of maybe severable or more controversial issues or things that people have made controversial, so they could be voted on separately in the hopes that then maybe the bulk of the revisions for what was Ordinance 26 or question 1 would get passed through without challenge, rather than litigating for sport.
I would like to suggest that the part that deals with doing away with the 5-year review of the Charter Review Committee, that part be taken out of question number 1. That seems to be one issue that wouldn't have much problem either way. So
It was my intent to leave the requirement for the Charter Review Committee for it to have a charter review every 5 years so that it would remain in the charter even in the proposed revision.
Okay.
And it was further my intent to separate the city manager's residency requirement into a separate question so that the voters would have an opportunity to vote on it. Again, and it can't be underscored that question or that concept or decision, if you will, whether or not the city manager is required to live in the city or not, won't affect our current city manager in any way. He already lives here. But it's something that the voters should have the opportunity to consider, and after being fully educated on it, because as we've discussed up here before, the issue becomes how do you it's really something that is best reserved for the council to decide at contract time, because of just the economics and the difficulty sometimes of finding people living in the city or whatever. So it's a decision that we would recommend that the voters have that opportunity. So we'd make it a separate question. That'd be my suggestion.
Yes, I have a thought and a question. Is opposing counsel not appealing the 3-year sit-out, which was encompassed with one of the other questions?
Yes, that is being appealed right now.
So should we make that a 4th question so it's clear to the voters that there's a question as far as if a council member is required to sit out for 3 years and then you can run again so you're not an incumbent?
Well, I think that the problem with trying to do that is that it's highly unlikely that we're going to have a decision from the 4th District Court of Appeal prior to this vote, prior to this referendum going before the public. So, I mean, it's just kind of, it is what it is, so to speak, at this particular point in time. I mean, it was passed by the voters, and it is the status of our charter at this particular point in time that that you're required to sit out for 3 years. Ironically, if they prevail on appeal and any of these measures pass, then it'll end up being that you wouldn't have a required number of years to sit out. So I kind of see it as counterproductive myself. But
what was the question that we were speaking about?
We're talking about question number question number 3. It was Ordinance 28 is the one that requires council members, after having reached their term limit, after being term limited out of office, to remain out of office, not be able to take office again for 3 years. And that did pass by 60%. It was 60% of the votes cast, and is being appealed.
Mark.
I have a few comments. First, I just want to clarify a few things. There was an article in the newspaper talking about how maybe there was some suggestion that we weren't doing this the right way. We insisted on March. You know, we were pretty consistent that an August election wasn't ideal, at least in my personal opinion, but the supervisor of elections did make it clear that August was a possibility, November was not an option, and March was the suggested time for municipal election, and that's what we agreed on, although August was not absolutely not an option at that time. So, you know, we want to make sure the facts are straight. I had a lot of difficulty thinking about this process. I was very much in favor of a March election and was not in favor of moving it into August, but I've talked to a number of people over the past few weeks, those that were in favor and those that were opposed to some of the questions that we were asking. And everybody thought that, everybody I've spoken to was in favor of revisiting the questions in August. And we do have the benefit of hindsight. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with taking 2 elections to get it right. We learned a lot. Max and I had a lot of discussions about how we can word the language the right way, making sure that the questions are going to be as unambiguous as possible. We have time. We have the luxury of 20/20 hindsight, which is not usually the fact in anything we do in life. So knowing that, we certainly have an opportunity to put the questions out there, to make sure that they're done the right way, make sure that the questions are as unambiguous as possible. And I was actually had a nice conversation with a couple of people in the room here tonight about the questions, and we agree. And I think that's the key, is that once we know that we agree what questions should be asked, forget about what I think the answer should be, but what the questions should be asked, we're making a big step forward. So leaving the 5-year requirement in the charter, I think, is very important. Removing the language about the city attorney's residence, whether or not it should be asked in a city manager, city manager, in a separate question is perfectly reasonable. Yeah, city attorney should live here too. The question I have for you, Max, and then a statement. Number one, I just want to confirm that any of the language that was asked in questions 3 and 4 doesn't prohibit or doesn't change any of the language that was in question 1. And I know we had this conversation already, and I just want to make sure that when the language comes in going forward, that if there's anything that was asked in question 3 in terms of terms, what a term means, what a term is defined as, the length of the term, how a potentially an incompleted term is filled, whatever vacancies, whether or not that is something that should stay in the charter language or not. That's something that I just want to be sure of. And also, you know, this is our last opportunity to get this right, and I believe that we will. I think we have a lot of consensus from a lot of different people throughout the city to make sure that it's done right. I have confidence in the city attorney that we're going to get it done right, and we, as a council, will be reading the language very carefully to make sure that the residents feel comfortable with what we're going to do. So with that, I'm 100% supportive of moving this election to August. I think that 3 questions, if not 4, might be required, and I'll wait to see what, Max, you come up with. Thank you.
I'd like to actually continue one of the points that Mark made. The supervisor of elections was pretty adamant about us not being on August. But it turns out that we are not the only municipality that's going to have ballot language in August. And I think she, for lack of a better term, saw the writing on the wall. And litigation is one thing, and I don't think she wants any more of it. So it sort of, she sort of had to say yes to us because she now got questions from Boynton and...
No, Lake Worth and Boca Raton.
Lake Worth and Boca Raton. So we were all trying to get this done in one fell swoop, and I think we're putting our best foot forward to get this done as clearly and concisely as possible. I do like keeping the charter review every 5 years. I mean, it's up to the council whether they do it or not. I know that they've had charter reviews in the past, which the information came to the councils. They looked and they said thank you and did nothing with the information. So we as a council, have been trying to do something with the information that we receive, and we are trying to, as Jane so aptly put it, bring our charter into the 21st century. I mean, this charter, the last time it was really evaluated and changed was before cell phones and computers. And we need to be going forward, not going backwards. So I too am in favor of all of this, and I think we've all voiced our opinions, and it's time for a vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. All righty, so now we get to items for council action and discussion. We'll do the appointments to external boards and committees first, and then we'll bring up the topics of steeplechase and whatnot. I know last year we sort of, I sort of said, okay, why don't you all do this, this, and this, and I just want to make sure that everybody is happy, or if they're not, where would they like to be, because I don't want anybody to be on a council that they don't feel is working with how they work. So there are several of these that the mayor has to sit on by the way the purpose is written, and several of these that the mayor that I sit on are actually not appointed by the city. I was voted in for Palm Beach League of Cities as a large city representative, and Treasure Coast, I'm there. I was appointed by the league also. So we have Mark as the Palm Beach County League of Cities representative, and Mark, I don't know, I know that as you said earlier, your schedule is going to be a little crazy this year, so is this something you'd like to?
I'd actually like to ask to maybe trade with Councilman Litt. I know that you've had a very strong interest in the league, which I very much appreciate. The meetings are on Wednesdays at lunchtime, and as you know, the league meets all over the county. I have a hard time getting to those meetings. I can if I need to be there for sure. I've made arrangements at my office to not be at the office to attend those lunches, but I prefer not. I have a lot of impact with some of our state legislators through my association, so I think it would be wise to, if you'd be willing to take that, and I would actually like to be on the Palm Beach North Economic Development Committee. As a small business owner, it fits with what I do. I don't know if that's something that we can or can't do, but I'd actually like to be removed from the League of Cities and recommend Rochelle take that spot. But I don't have to be on the other committee, but I'd like to find something else to do.
No, absolutely. And Rochelle, how are you about that?
I would love to be on the League of Cities Committee. I go to all the meetings anyway, and it's following especially their legislative affairs branch, so no, that's a perfect fit. Mark should know that the Economic Development Committee is actually sort of split internally into two. The mayor is on the transportation end. My end is dealing with workforce housing and the parts of the county that are dealing with workforce housing, and those are the representatives that are on that part of it. So if you're still interested, that's an okay swap with me.
That's fine. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. All right. So let's go down the list. North County Intergovernmental, that is the mayor. TPA, this is another one of those, this is not one that historically has rotated because of the 5-year plans that are with this. So the same council person has served until the end of their term. So I know that Eric Javelin was on this for many years, and if it's the pleasure of the council, I would like to continue because that's actually a really good fit in with my appointment to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council.
Speaking of the
which is now called the TPA, the Transportation Planning Agency, yes, okay? And then Patty, if we could update, that actually rotates now, so we can and their email address has changed, so we can update that information. Seacoast is Ron. Mark, would you like to stay on the Bioscience Land Protection Advisory Board?
Sure, we didn't meet once, so
I'm
all good with that.
It says it meets 4 times a year, but they really meet as needed, and I think I was on that board the previous year, and we met once. So
No, I'd like to stay on that, and I'd like to actually have a meeting. I'd like to actually be a part of that. I'd like to see something come of that at one time. So yes, I'd prefer that.
Okay. Palm Beach Workforce Alliance Consortium is the mayor, and Rochelle attended with me this month. Thank you, Rochelle. And they meet once or twice a year, so basically we're just pretty much there to okay their budget and whatnot. I think the meeting took 10 minutes. So, Carl, I'm sure you want to stay on the North Lake Boulevard Task Force.
All about traffic, baby.
Okay. So Palm Beach North Economic Development Committee, we're going to put Mark there. And Rochelle, I mean, any of us can go to any of these. So I know that I...
Could I be an alternate with Carl on the North Lake?
Please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm hoping to expand that voice on the traffic, because we all really teamed up against DOT for the interchange on North Lake. And I'm wanting it to feed over to PGA, and we've got so many traffic problems. I would kind of like this to expand, and if we've got more voices on it, it'd be
So many
nice.
questions on that area
Yep.
too, that just to be more informed on what's happening with the corridor, so that would be great.
Absolutely. And Matthew's not here to say yay or nay about the Palm Beach North Government Affairs Committee meeting, but I'm sure we would like to continue that. And Treasure Coast, even this is just for informational purposes that's on here because I was appointed by the League of Cities to that, and that would be the end of that discussion. So do we need a motion in there? What do we need here? We just all said yes. Is that okay? And we can move on?
Yeah, I would just take a motion and a vote to approve the assignments.
May I have a motion?
I'll
Madam
make
Mayor,
a motion.
We'll both motion at the same time.
Both motion and both second at the same
We'll
time,
second it, too.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And next item on the agenda would be steeplechase. Carl, you wanted to bring that up.
I did, ma'am. And coincidentally, I just mentioned North Lake and 995, and we collectively were ahead of that project probably a year or more. And I remember when DOT, when you and I probably were first month on the dais here, and DOT came up and stood there, and you and I both came after him and go, there's not enough hours in this meeting for us to go after you on how you're going to put out, eminent domain and all that stuff. But my thought on steeplechase is to stay as far ahead of the issue and be proactive instead of wait, because they're going to make their choices relatively quickly based on the information that we have. So a large part of the community was here. They're a large voice, and I think we're hearing them. And I believe if a resolution in support of the wall will help them while they're campaigning anywhere. And it's not just, they know they have our support, but if we have something in writing for them and to actually show them and that they can campaign, that they physically have the council's support in writing, I think that goes a long way other than us waiting 2 months now, because I know they're trying to go lobby and do legislature or whatever. And I think we also send another message to Department of Transportation, who we've debated over these other products that they're putting out, that we are now on board with the citizens of Palm Beach Gardens on this issue. And I think it would really go a long way on a resolution that we can simply direct staff to sign or to draft, and us sign it collectively in support of the citizens that support us. Well, they have a host of, she wants to know what we would put on the resolution, and I think we have.
What do you have in mind? I just want you to
We
expand on
have
that.
that, and I think Ron.
Yes, I do have a letter from the presidency, the board of directors, and in that letter they outline 5 elements that they're concerned with, and we would address a resolution incorporating those areas of their concern to mimic what they put in their letter.
I didn't either before. Is there anything in there that you see as a problem for the city to promise or put out there at this point?
We're not going to promise anything, but what we will do is we will issue a resolution outlining the basic concerns that they have. It's noise, air, ambient levels. So it will be those types of things. And it also will have to couch it so that we put in there the necessary walls as determined. We'll craft the language very carefully and have it ready for you.
And it will come back before you, so you'll see it on an agenda and you all get to consider it. And if you need to make any changes, you're not comfortable with something, you'll be able to do it even at that meeting.
I would like to actually have a resolution. It would be something I could take to the Metropolitan Planning Agency and ask. TPA. Transportation Planning Agency. I know it's the new website, new name, and new logo and everything. The TPA, Transportation Planning Agency. It would. I know that in the past, then when a city asks for something pretty specific, the rest of the other cities usually get on board with it. So it would give us a little bit more ammunition.
Well, we would address issues as they've put down here, the increase of visible traffic, noise pollution, airborne particulate debris, loss of privacy, community security, et cetera, those types of things.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Shows that we are ahead of the curve supporting their cause. And if we're ahead of this, then we're again ahead of Department of Transportation, and they in turn will, because we did DOT by ourselves with I-95. So now we have a voice in that community with the backing of the council. It might just be much louder with a resolution. That's my feeling.
And with your experience and Maria's experience with the TPA, I'll go along with you.
Mark?
Well, absolutely. We all have said it, and we will do what we need to do to support the community because, you know, when you're a homeowner, you never want to see an organization do something that can hurt you. And obviously these folks have a legitimate concern, so I'm 100% supportive of writing a resolution that will basically tell everybody that we're 100% behind supporting it, and we'll do what we have to do. But at the same time, we have to just do the process as the process comes to us. Right. And we can't promise something that may not even be needing of a promise. We don't want to come up with a solution unless there's a solution that has to be made. So, but yes, I'm 100% supportive, so thank you.
So it's sounding like that the council would be directing staff and city manager and the city attorney to draw up a resolution.
That would be my request.
Okay, I think we're all on board with that. Okay, anybody have any other items they'd like to discuss?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
and okay, all right. Well, the chair recognizes.
You guys just wait. I got to get this one out.
The chair recognizes Carl because he's so excited.
No, with the Kazanjan Golf Course, we raised $40,000, and I forgot to mention that a large portion of that went to Sherry's kids for the golf tournament, so those kids can go play golf in Scotland. It wasn't as much as I wanted it to be. I wanted some other ideas on how to raise more money around the golf cart course, but that specific day is really designed for Caitlin. But we did agree on a significant amount of money that went back to Sherry. I forgot to get that out.
I'll follow up on that.
Hey, you know, it's Thursday.
Rochelle.
Last month, I spoke a little bit about the frustration that I had over the preemption of the municipalities being able to do anything with respect to regulating guns in our communities. Tallahassee, we received a note from Alicia this week that Tallahassee just joined a growing list of Florida municipalities that want to overturn the statewide preemption, and they've gone ahead with a resolution. I also have resolutions from the cities of Delray, Boca, and Boynton Beach, who have similar resolutions stating that they are against the state preemption, and I think it's something that we ought to come out and consider as well. It's an attack on home rule at its very core, and I'm proposing that we go ahead with something like that.
Comments?
Yes, I would like to expand on that. I mean, I think this should be a strong resolution stating that we are in support of what the state legislature did do in short order, recognizing the governor and the legislature for passing a law that will help mental health. But, we can't go around this community and talk to anybody that says that they're not comfortable with the status of access to assault weapons anywhere. Yes, the schools might become a little bit safer, but when my colleague at the office, my new associate who's new to the area, said, I'm afraid to go to the park, and my wife and I don't want to go to City Place because we're afraid of something happening. This is more than just the concern about gun violence, weapons of mass destruction to be used in our communities. You can hear it everywhere. And you know what? I'm just so proud of the kids down in Parkland, and they're having a lot of mental health issues themselves. Depression is starting to set in, PTSD, concerns about their futures. It's not just the people that have suffered loss directly, but all those people that live a lifetime wondering what they could have done to avoid the problem in the first place. I, for one, am so proud of the fact that the kids in our communities are no longer afraid to say no. Myself, as being one that's been very much opposed to assault weapons being accessible to people, have kind of, over the past few years, just kind of given up. And this has renewed my own resolve in trying to do something that we can do to try to make it known that the City of Palm Beach Gardens is listening to the residents. Although we are supportive of the Second Amendment, we are also unwilling to sit back and wait for something to happen to stop the sales of assault weapons in this country. It's not going to happen here in Palm Beach Gardens by itself, but to form a resolution that would say these things, I think, are important. I've created a couple of whereases that I can pass off to the city attorney. I've already spoken to him a little bit about it, and would like to have you all read it as well. And this is not trying to step out of line as to what a municipal government can and cannot do, but it's just trying to show that we are listening to our residents and are not afraid to make a resolution to support them. I can, or I can give them to Max and let him write them up and pass them out.
Is that something that we want to direct Max to come up with for next time?
Well,
a resolution in support? Or
second, I think that anything in the nature of putting a resolution of gun control or anything associated with that
needs a presentation.
Needs an opportunity for you all to explain precisely what it is that you want to talk about. There are 5 of you, and I don't know where all 5 of you stand on this thing. I don't have a problem with it. I just want to make sure that when we go forward with the resolution, we're meeting what the flavor of all the council members want to achieve. Some may want to achieve one thing, some may want to achieve another, and you haven't had a chance to talk about this yet.
Right.
I would prefer that you talked about it and gave us a very clear direction on where you want us to go with this thing.
Should that be talked about now, or put on another agenda?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Should that be put on a separate agenda, or is that something we should talk about now?
I would prefer that, because I would imagine that would be
a discussion.
Quite a conversation, and the public may want to weigh in on that.
So I would like, if it's the council's pleasure, I'd like to see that put on a future agenda.
I'll do that.
We have a presentation and we have as much information possible.
I'll look at the agendas and get that on as early as possible.
Is there an opportunity to submit some of these statements to the city attorney prior to that meeting for his
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You can have conversation, or you can communicate in writing, however you'd like to express your opinion. That's fine. And maybe we can put together a presentation of opinions, and you all can talk about it and help us figure out where you want to go with this.
Thank you.
I think that's wonderful. Any other?
I actually have one other
items of
comment.
Discussion? Okay.
If I may. In regards to our annual election of, or a selection of mayor and vice mayor, it's interesting how you come to this, and I talked to a few different people, and everyone was so interested in who was going to vote for what and who's going to be mayor and vice mayor, and it just seemed a little bit strange. going back over the years, April meeting has always been kind of an interesting meeting, and obviously I can point to the city manager and the staff, and I think everyone's just kind of like, oh, who's going to do what? And I thought it was a little strange that there hasn't been, and there never really has been, some type of succession plan. And every board I've ever sat on, even if you look at the state legislature, there is a kind of a unwritten policy, or maybe there is a written policy, but it's obviously not set in stone. It's not an ordinance in the charter. It can't be, but knowing who is going to do what as the years go on, I think provides a lot of continuity for the staff, continuity for the city manager, continuity amongst the council, the residents, the business community, to know this year we have a mayor, next year, you know, whatever is thought of in order to ensure that this process is relatively smooth. I think it's been interesting this past year because we didn't really know each other that well, and we didn't quite understand who each other's were, and I think we've all gotten to know each other a little bit over the year, so we've gained a little bit of confidence in knowing individuals' personalities, how they're going to handle certain situations. Mayor, you've really grown over the past year. You've learned to take control of the meetings, and it's been nice to watch, and I think that's why I was happy to recommend you for another year as mayor, because I think you're just going to get better and better, as you've already done.
Thank you.
But there certainly is a need to let everybody know who should follow. And I think that's important because it seems silly going to the chamber meetings and say, well, who's going to be mayor? I don't know who's going to be mayor. You know, and not that you can say for sure, because we never know who's going to be mayor. We don't know if someone's going to be up for election and not win, choose not to do it. Maybe they fall off a cliff and do something crazy and lose the confidence of their colleagues. Certainly that's something that can change, but I think that for next year, we should have that kind of discussion. And I don't know if there's any reason or whereabouts to put some type of policy in writing that would kind of allow the council to know roughly what should or shouldn't be done. You don't have to agree with that. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, I think this was something we can discuss in the future and see what other people do. Carl.
We can put it off, and I can hold my thoughts on it. But it's funny, we talk about mental health and weapons going right into who's the council members. And I know that over the years there's been multiple personalities as we have on this current council, and I know that pendulum swings really quickly. And if you look at the history of this council going back many years, there's been personality disorders, I believe, with some council members that's removed themselves. And if we have a natural progression on a person that might not be the best fit for the community, then what happens when that person's mayor? And I'm really not debating you, Mark, because those are my thoughts out loud too. And it's almost like, I try not to get emotionally involved with mayor and vice mayor, but after what happened to me last year, it was hard to just sit back. I just felt like I just shut my mouth and let you guys do whatever you want. So I think it's a careful process, and I think that I want community input based on our constituents on what they think, and let the community guide us on maybe who we should choose for mayor and vice mayor like we do every other decision.
Well, perhaps, if I may.
Go right ahead.
Again, this year was an interesting year because we didn't know each other, and hopefully as the years go by, there will be a little bit more continuity amongst the council. And council members will know each other better. You'll never know for sure. There'll never be a 100% guarantee that you're going to be 100% comfortable with somebody a year down the road. And I'm not suggesting it has to be that way. But I think it's something that I would think that the community at large would actually prefer, and the staff would prefer to know, this is kind of our succession plan, and this is how we're going to make sure that things move smoothly. There's going to be potential for some issues, but hopefully those issues are not necessarily for the person who's stepping into mayor, but maybe someone down the line. I don't know, just a thought.
Well, I think let's table the discussion for the moment, because this is it's funny because we can't have this discussion outside of this room because of sunshine. Exactly. But it's a lot to think about, and
I think that other people, other council members, and we all may have more questions, and this might be a longer discussion or a shorter discussion, but I think if we could.
It's not something we have to have tonight.
Correct.
No. And no doubt about it,
But
that
we we should have it. I agree, we should have it.
the month leading up to the April meeting, besides everything else we need to be completely educated in the topics of the community, it's nerve-wracking on how much community input there is on mayor and vice mayor. It's a lot of discussions that we can, obviously, we vote on it, so it's totally blind to us on who's doing what. So maybe it is a good idea that we think about it, have conversations on it, and revisit
Have more
it.
coffee.
Or something else.
I wasn't asking to put some policy in writing now, but I would like the conversation to be, if this is something that the council as a whole would like to do before next April, that there's some kind of thought.
The door is open. Absolutely. You did. Okay. I do want to go to something that Carl said about Sherry and the kids for Scotland. There are other opportunities. There is going to be a golf tournament at Sand Hill Crane, August 20th.
August 20th?
I'm sorry. Oh, my God. Boy, that year went by. April 20th, there's going to be a golf tournament at Sand Hill Crane, and you can find the information on the PBGYAA website. And also, I will be hosting an Italian dinner on August 24th.
You cooking?
Yeah.
Mom cooking?
I'm cooking in the kitchen. No, the menu's already chosen, but I believe it's $150 a person plus tax, with proceeds going to Sherry's kids. So that will be at the Dancing Crane, and it's limited to 75 people. So
Good idea, because I was hoping that there was something other than golf that I could get involved in to help them out.
four-course dinner. So it's just another way to invite people from the community to the golf course without having to play golf, and an opportunity for new friends to meet and experience the clubhouse.
Where are we at on participation on that? Do you have a,
I don't have a number.
we can always,
You mean on the dinner or on the golf?
either way, what if we, because we just supported the PBA on that tournament, what if we turn around and see if we can get the PBA to support us as far as advertising that way?
Happy to send them off the information.
Okay.
We
What's
want to
the
get as
date?
many. The
August
tournament
20th.
is April 20th, and
Be there.
the charity dinner is April Tuesday, whatever, that 24th, April 24th.
This April 24th.
Yes. And that's limited to 75 people, because that's all that the Dancing Crane will hold downstairs.
Where is the RSVP and the information on that?
I will get that to you tomorrow.
Understood.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for a great meeting. But before I call the meeting to adjourn, City Attorney report?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm adjourning the meeting at 10:05. Thank you all.